Chapter 1205. That kiss, that glance. Time seemed to melt into nothingness, turning into yellowed, chien paper. Time seemed to have lost its color, turning into dull ink. But on this painting, the face formed by the fragments of memory, that smile, was the same as it was in the past, the berserker's song. The music of the past had come to an end, and the people had dispersed. The fragments of memories fell to the ground, and the misery that covered it. The beautiful hearts were shattered, and the cold, eternal night was filled with endless loneliness. The eyes were still closed, and they did not want to wake up. This was Yuxian. But there would always be a hint of longing that lingered in the passage of time, but it could not find the brightness of the past. In the darkness of sleep, it would feel that the night watch was long, and it would be thin. It would mumble, "Will the love between us turn cold?" That kiss, that glance. It could no longer express its feelings. When it looked back, it would feel as if it had forgotten about the past. It would be a lonely person leaning against dusk, but could not see the color of dusk. It could only mumble in its heart and sigh about how many times life had it been through autumn. This was also Yuxian. The crimson-haired Su Ming stood in midair and was the center of attention. However, his gaze was only focused on one person. It was as if time had stopped at that moment, as if all the lives in the area were no longer there, and there was only her. The 1,000 years of separation in divine and star ocean. Su Hui's company, Bai Ling's aloof but gentle words, all of these things made Su Ming forget many things. However, there was always a small white flower in the rain at the bottom of his heart. That flower's name was Xian. When they kissed in the past, and their eyes met, the determination and gentleness in the girl's eyes, and the sadness and madness in Su Ming's eyes were fireworks that not even time could blow away. He still remembered the kiss in the past when they parted. That parting did not mean going far away, but life and death. From then on, that lively and smiling woman would no longer exist in the world. Once she kissed him, she stepped on the cool breeze and gradually closed her eyes. Her petite body fused with space because she knew that if she left this time, they might never meet again in the next life. "Are you Dao Kong?" An old voice filled with cold, killing intent traveled out from the white tiger's continent like a gust of cold wind. When that voice echoed in the air, it was like an incredibly sharp blade that wanted to slice through space and cut off all grudges. However, no matter how sharp that blade was, it could not cut off Su Ming's gaze. There was only the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World, who Su Ming had ignored, turned his head around at that moment and noticed Yuxian's abnormality. He saw a smile that had not appeared for a long time on Yuxian's face after he was stunned by her beauty, and his expression instantly turned dark. It was a pity that the smile was not directed at him. When the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World slowly turned his head around and saw Su Ming and Yuxian's gazes clearly, anger immediately appeared in his eyes. He let out a cold harumph, lifted his right hand, and right before Su Ming's face, he seized Yuxian's neck tightly. When he dragged her to his side, he even sniffed the center of her brows. He lifted his chin, and with a hint of scorn and provocation in his eyes, he lifted his head and looked at Su Ming. The crimson-haired Su Ming could ignore old Ming's voice from the white tiger's continent and ignore the thoughts of all the people around him. But when he saw the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World choking Yuxian and saw pain appear on her face, but she still wanted to maintain her smile, went mad. The crimson-haired Su Ming had always been a lawless person. He could do whatever he wanted regardless of the consequences. Besides, he had been suppressing a strong desire to vent his anger in Su Xian Yi's isolation grounds. That desire could erupt at any moment, and with just one spark, it could completely ignite the crimson-haired Su Ming's madness. If the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World had not done this, then under Yuxian's smile and gaze, Su Ming's heart would have slowly calmed down until he returned to normal. If that was the case, then perhaps he would not have to fight too much on that day. However, the ignorant third prince's foolish actions had become the spark that ignited Su Ming's madness. He turned into a spark and released, the madness that had been hidden in Su Ming's body ever since he returned from Divine Essence Star Ocean. It was a madness that could destroy the barren lands of true Sacredine world at the slightest disagreement. With a bang, a sea of fire that surged into the sky erupted from Su Ming's body. As it roared, it swept through the area and immediately swept Dao Lin and Dao Hua away. The two of them coughed up blood at the same time. The flourishing lotuses on their bodies instantly activated, and only then did they not die from the impact of the sea of fire as they tumbled backwards. At the instant the sea of fire erupted, all the people from true Morning Dao world on the Azure Dragon's continent immediately stood up and stared at the sky in shock. At the same time, the expressions of all the sect masters from Morning Dao sect in the area changed, especially sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing. Their expressions changed, and when they looked towards Su Ming, they frowned. In their hearts, they knew very well why true Sacredine world had come, and they had already thought of how they should handle the situation. Since Su Ming had become a dynast, then he was not allowed to be punished by true Sacredine world. This was something true Sacredine world knew very well. At most, they would just punish him slightly, and the main point would be to compensate him. As long as they showed true Sacredine world enough respect, and Su Ming bowed slightly, they could turn this matter into a small matter. As for how they should handle this small matter, that was another method. However, the sea of fire that erupted from Su Ming's body at that moment destroyed their plans. At the instant the three old men frowned and were about to shout at him, Su Ming suddenly threw his head back and let out a crazed laugh. The sea of fire around him surged into the sky, but it was not the fire of Flame Fiend's progenitor. Instead, it was the resentment suppressed in the crazed Su Ming's body. To a certain extent, it was similar to the resentful way. Almost at the instant the sea of fire surged into the sky, Su Ming took a swift step forward and turned into a long arc that charged towards the Vermilion Bird's continent, where the people from the Emperor of Abyss True World were. The expression of the third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World changed drastically at that moment. With a dark expression, he swung his arm, and the 1,000 Abyss dragons floating in the Vermilion Bird's continent roared at the same time. As they roared, they rushed towards Su Ming. This scene stunned the people in the area, especially the sect masters. They originally thought that Su Ming was targeting true Sacredine world. In fact, true Sacredine world had already made full preparations at the instant the sea of fire erupted from Su Ming's body. But Su Ming did not even spare a glance at the White Tiger's continent where true Sacredine world was. He charged straight towards the Vermilion Bird's continent where the Emperor of Abyss True World was. All of this might have seemed to have happened over a long period of time, but in truth, it had only happened in an instant. As the sea of fire surged into the sky, Su Ming had already crashed into the Abyss dragons, charging towards him. The Abyss dragon in the lead was the third prince's steed. It was the largest dragon, and the mighty pressure spreading out from its body showed that it was a dragon whose level of cultivation was equivalent to those in Mastery Realm. This was the Abyss dragon. No matter how great their level of cultivation was, they were Abyss dragons whose souls were controlled by the Emperor of Abyss True World for generations. Only with this sort of power could they become the steed of the third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World. The dragon's body was filled with an ancient presence. At that moment, when it rushed towards Su Ming, it opened its ghastly mouth and let out a roar that shook the sky and earth. Boom! The red-haired Su Ming did not stop. At the instant the incoming Abyss dragon crashed into him, he lifted his right hand and hurled a punch at it. In the mid of the loud bang, the instant Su Ming's fist landed on the Abyss dragon, the dragon shuddered and tumbled backwards. Its flesh and blood shuddered, and with a loud whoosh, tens of thousands of wounds tore open at the same time. Soon after, a large amount of flesh and blood gushed out of the wounds as it tumbled backwards. In just the span of a few breaths, all the flesh and blood on the dragon's body were separated from its bones. As it tumbled backwards, blood fog gushed out of the dragon's body. All its flesh and blood were destroyed, and what remained was an empty skeleton. Even its life force and soul were destroyed by the rebound from Su Ming's punch. With a bang, the skeleton fell to the ground and landed right in front of the third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World, causing him to shudder. He grabbed Yu Xian and pulled her in front of him, then stood up as well. There was disbelief on his face, and his breathing quickened. Abyss Dragon Rune, activate your life force and kill this person. The remaining 1,000 Abyss Dragons in the sky were all in the later stage of World Plane Realm. They had been carefully chosen by the third prince, which was why their levels of cultivation were the same. At that moment, all of them roared at the sky and rushed towards Su Ming. They connected with each other in a bizarre fashion, and each Abyss Dragon bit the tail of another Abyss Dragon. Because of it, they were connected to each other and formed a circle. In an instant, they surrounded Su Ming, who was charging madly towards the Vermilion Birds continent. All of this happened too suddenly, so the people in the area only managed to react to it at that moment, especially the disciples from Morning Dao sect on the Azure Dragon's continent. They immediately flew up and had all their power erupt from their bodies. This was true Morning Dao world, and the person surrounded by 1,000 Abyss Dragons in the sky was their dynast, Dao Kong, who had just been conferred the title of dynast. During challenges, they could fight against each other, but when there were external enemies, they would be fellow sect members who could move together. This was the guidance that Morning Dao sect had formed over the course of countless years. This guidance was the first law that had been carved into the hearts of the disciples of Morning Dao sect and branded into their souls. The people from the fourth true world on the Black Tortoise's continent had calm expressions on their faces. A glint appeared in the eyes of the old man in blue, but he did not speak. By his side, Reverend Zi Long frowned. The two of them might have fought against Su Ming in the past, but in the end, they had formed a strange friendship. Neither of them spoke of this friendship, but it existed. If there was truly a source for it, then perhaps it was due to Reverend Zi Long's guilt and respect for Su Ming. He felt guilty because he had left the Fifth Ocean, and he respected Su Ming for all the shocking things he had done in Su Ming's hands. Morning Dao sect, what a sect you are. Is this your anointment ceremony? Or are you trying to kill all of us from the three great true worlds who are here to watch the ceremony? Is the person you conferred the title of dynast, or a lunatic? This person can destroy the world where true Sacredine world is stationed. He can kill Abyss Dragons in a frenzy at the slightest displeasure. By the looks of it, he wants to kill our fellow Taoists from the Emperor of Abyss True World. Is this the dynast you conferred? Old Ming mocked from the White Tiger's continent where true Sacredine world was located. Here's the first update. If I include the 3 days before the end of last month, then today is the 7th consecutive day where I have exploded. Can you see my attitude? If you see it, I want your monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1206. Disciples of Morning Dao sect, move back and sit down. Sect Master, you said in a low voice. His voice was like a thunderclap, causing the Morning Dao sect disciples who had their cultivation bases erupt and were prepared to help Su Ming to land on the Azure Dragon's continent in silence. The 9 million cultivators on the 9 continents also forcefully suppressed the eruption of their cultivation bases. They stared at the area above them and returned to their own stone platforms. It was also at that moment that the circle formed by the 1,000 Abyss Dragons around the crimson-haired Su Ming swiftly shrank inwardly. It shrank so quickly that in the blink of an eye, it charged towards Su Ming. When it closed in, a gigantic illusory dragon head gathered together. As it roared, it gathered the power of 1,000 Abyss Dragons and their burning souls. A vast amount of life force spread out from it, and it closed in on Su Ming with loud bangs. This was the result of 1,000 Abyss Dragons fusing together. Once their cultivation bases and power gathered together, they would erupt with their strongest power. In fact, under the orders of the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World, the 1,000 Abyss Dragons had invisible flames burning their souls and cultivation bases. This was the price they were paying by burning their life force to unleash their most powerful cultivation bases. After they unleashed this attack, there was no need for anyone else to do anything. Their longevity would only last for a few days, and they would die one by one in a matter of days. However, this price was exchanged for a power that could shock the heavens. In fact, this power surpassed the simultaneous attack launched by 1,000 cultivators in the later stage of World Plane Realm after they burned their lives. After all, the Abyss Dragons were not cultivators. They still had great physical strength. If Su Ming had not gone through the Dynash trial, then besides summoning the fifth kiln, he would have no other way to deal with this strike. The feeling this strike gave him was that it was only slightly weaker than the ancient god's punch during the battlefield. However, after going through the trial, blood-red light shone in Su Ming's eyes. At the instant the gigantic dragon head formed by the astonishing power closed in on him, he turned around without any hesitation. With his back turned towards the incoming dragon head, he lifted his right hand, and just like how he had done when his body was controlled by the will of the predecessor of Tao Ocean during the trial, he struck his chest with his right hand. At the instant he did so, the gigantic dragon head behind him charged forward. With Su Ming's body as the center, the dragon head descended at the same time, and a loud bang rose into the air. Su Ming's body jolted, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. The gigantic dragon head behind him shuddered violently. As roars echoed in the air, the dragon head crumbled into pieces. The rebound from Su Ming's body was like an unmoving mountain. Once it shattered, the connection between the 1,000 Abyss Dragons was also shattered. For a period of time, the 1,000 Abyss Dragons around Su Ming tumbled backwards. As they did so, they let out pained roars. Their bodies shattered, and wounds tore through their bodies. In the end, their flesh, blood, and bones were separated, just like the Abyss Dragon in Mastery Realm. As the 1,000 Abyss Dragons retreated, their flesh and blood exploded, and only their skeletons were left. They fell from the sky. A thick, bloody stench filled the entire area. As the crazed Su Ming's expression contorted, his eyes turned bloodshot, and under the shocked gazes of most of the people around him, he sucked in a sharp breath. The endless amount of flesh and blood in the area charged towards Su Ming at a rapid speed and disappeared into a gigantic vortex that had suddenly appeared around him. In the depths of the vortex was Yu Xian's Abyss Dragon, which had turned into a big dog in Su Ming's storage bag. At that moment, it was trembling, and the same madness as Su Ming's appeared in its eyes. It continued absorbing the vast amount of Abyss Dragon's flesh and blood. As Abyss Dragons, they were existences that could devour each other to become stronger. However, this sort of devouring was strictly forbidden in the Emperor of Abyss True World. If any Abyss Dragon did this, they would not be exiled but killed. Yet at that moment, it no longer belonged to the Emperor of Abyss True World, and it no longer cared. Its injuries instantly healed, and its cultivation base erupted continuously. From its previous level of cultivation in World Plane Realm, it rose straight to Lunar Kulpa Realm, then reached Solar Kulpa Realm. It might not have attained great completion, but it still made it feel as if it had been reborn. Abyss Dragon. I have one too. Su Ming swung his arm, and an astonishing dragon roar immediately came from the vortex. The Abyss Dragon that belonged to Yu Xian and Su Ming rushed out of the vortex. As it roared at the sky, a gigantic sun appeared behind it. At the instant the Abyss Dragon appeared, another Abyss Dragon roared from the vortex. Its body was clearly much larger than before, but there was no awe-inspiring look in its eyes. Instead, there was a sleazy look in them. Clearly, this Abyss Dragon was manifested by the bald crane because it could not bear to be left out. The two Abyss Dragons surrounded Su Ming, and their roars shook the sky and earth. With a single move, Su Ming turned into a long arc that charged towards the Vermilion Birds continent. This scene shocked all the people in the area, and it also caused the heart of the third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World to tremble. As his expression twisted, he growled, cultivators from the Emperor of Abyss True World, what are you waiting for? I order you to do everything in your power to summon the ancestral dragon of the abyssal world, or offer up your flesh and blood to lure out the abyss demonic beast. Dao Kong, what are you doing? Sect Master Yu of Morning Dao Sect Masters Ri, Yu, and Xing shouted at Su Ming. When he lifted his body, intending to take a step forward to stop everything, old Yu and Ming from the White Tiger's continent laughed long and hard. Such an arrogant and mad person is not fit to be a dynast of Morning Dao Sect. Since you won't kill him, then let the two of us do it in your place. Old Masters Yu and Ming, these two old men who seemed so old that they could not even open their eyes, laughed as they leaped into the air. Terrifying cultivation bases erupted from their bodies with a bang. Fellow Taoists from the Emperor of Abyss True World, we will help you kill this bastard. With a loud whistle, the two old men charged towards Su Ming. Sect Master Yu's footsteps came to a halt for a moment as his expression turned dark. He did not move forward. Thank you, seniors. I will definitely tell my father about this. I will repay you in the future. The third prince's spirits were lifted. He forced down the fear in his heart and stared at Su Ming with a ferocious expression. Huakue. As he charged forward, the crimson-haired Su Ming had madness on his face. At that moment, he only had Yuxian in his eyes. At the instant he said those words, ripples immediately spread out in the air. Flame Fiend's progenitor took a step forward, and when he lifted his right hand, the flames belonging to him instantly spread out with a bang. They swept out in all directions and turned into 100,000 fireballs that swept towards the incoming cultivators from the Emperor of Abyss True World. Zhu Yukai. Su Ming lifted his right hand and seized the air. The life inequity spear immediately appeared in his hand. He let go of it, and at the instant it fell downwards, an arm stretched out from the air. Once it seized the spear, Zhu Yukai's plump body walked out. He sighed in his heart. His huge body instantly shrank, and in the blink of an eye, he turned into a middle-aged man with an awe-inspiring expression. He tightened his grip around the life inequity spear and took a step forward to charge towards old Yu and Ming. Life inequity spear, Changhe. You really are the war immortal Changhe. Old Yu and Ming's expressions changed swiftly. Besides searching for Dao Kong, they had come to Morning Dao Sect for another mission. And that was to find the person the old man in Life Realm, who was stationed in the barren lands of Divine Essence, had mentioned once he returned, was the disciple of the sublime paragon from true Sacredine World, the war immortal Changhe. Changhe has already died in the fifth kiln. I am Zhu Yukai. Once Zhu Yukai closed his eyes, he opened them swiftly. The power that was nearly at Death Realm erupted from him with a bang, and he charged towards old Yu and Ming. Zhu Yukai's level of cultivation was sometimes strong and sometimes weak, but when he took his current form, he was no longer the person the old man from true Sacredine World had said that he only possessed his will. Instead, he had truly attained great completion in Life Realm and was halfway into Death Realm. The War Immortal. However, at that moment, the War Immortal no longer belonged to true Sacredine World. Instead, he had come to Su Ming's side because of a promise. Boom! The battle shocked the heavens. With Zhu Yukai holding back old Yu and Ming and Flame Fiend's progenitor killing the cultivators from the Emperor of Abyss True World, Su Ming turned into a long arc that seemed to be able to crush space when the bald crane and the Abyss Dragon threw their heads back and roared. At the instant their voices reverberated in the universe, he charged towards the Vermilion Bird's continent, towards the third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World who had injured Yuxian. When Yuxian saw Su Ming arrive, a smile appeared on her face. Tears fell from her eyes. She knew that she had always known that Su Ming had not died. She also knew that there would come a day when she would be able to see him and meet him again. The things that had happened on this day had appeared in Yuxian's mind before, and now they had come true. It's you. You're not Dao Kong. You're the Su Ming from the Berserker's continent, in true Morning Dao World's Death region. You're the Su Ming who got to know that be *TCH Yuxian in the land of Berserkers. You're not Dao Kong. If the third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World still did not understand this, then he would have lived his life in vain. At the instant his voice traveled outwards, the crimson-haired Su Ming had already closed in on him. When he threw a punch forward, the world roared. A screen of light swiftly spread out from the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World. It was as if a huge bowl had been placed over him. The color of the screen of light was black, and it was semi-transparent. At the same time, waves of aura of abyss spread out from it. A mighty pressure that could suffocate people spread out from it. This mighty pressure surpassed that of those in Death Realm. This was the protective light that belonged to the Emperor of Abyss True World, the third prince's father. A loud bang rang in the air. Su Ming's fist landed on the screen of light, and a powerful rebound caused him to tumble backwards, causing him to cough up blood. At the same time, the air around the screen of light distorted, and 4 figures who had clearly been hiding in the area appeared. They turned into 4 long arcs, and with great killing intent, they charged towards Su Ming, who was tumbling backwards. The second chapter is here. Do you have monthly votes? To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1207. The 4 figures were incredibly quick, and based on the power of their cultivation bases, it could be seen that 2 of them were in Mastery Realm, while the other 2 were in Fate Realm. One of them was even a cultivator who had already mastered his own laws of fate. These 4 people were incredibly famous in any true world. If the 4 of them were together, the presence they formed would be like a tidal wave, and it would be difficult for anyone to ignore them. But the 4 of them chose to hide themselves. Even if the Abyss Dragon in Mastery Realm was killed, even if 1,000 Abyss Dragons perished, even if the cultivators from the Emperor of Abyss True World were dying shrilly in the sea of fire from Flame Fiend's progenitor, the 4 of them did not change their expressions. They continued hiding around the third prince and waited for Su Ming's arrival. Then, at the instant the screen of light appeared and Su Ming was forced back, they would launch a killing blow that was practically a sneak attack. Su Ming tumbled backwards. When his chi and blood tumbled about, the 4 long arcs closed in on him. They were 4 middle-aged men, 4 aloof gazes, and 4 powerful waves of killing intent. They turned into 4 divine abilities filled with the aura of abyss, and they instantly charged towards Su Ming. He could not dodge them, and it was difficult for him to avoid them. The laws around him changed, and the dimension around him looked as if it had been split apart, turning this place into an independent space that sealed off all of Su Ming's paths of retreat. With his chi and blood tumbling about, the 4 long arcs formed a near-fatal trap. The third prince laughed madly. Yuxian bit her bottom lip. The resolve in her eyes seemed to have turned into words in her heart, and she continuously told herself that the man in her eyes could bring about a miracle. Boom! Su Ming's body jolted. Even with his powerful physical body, when the 4 people attacked him at the same time, he was immediately heavily injured. When he coughed up blood, he fell back, but almost at the moment he moved back, the 4 people laughed coldly and charged forward again. For people, 4 attacks, and they appeared once more. Kill him. Remember to take out his soul. I want him to see how I'm going to trample on this *TCH. The third prince, who believed that he was not in any danger and that victory was already in his grasp, lifted his right hand and slapped Yuxian's face. *TCH, he's Su Ming, right? He's the Su Ming you met in the land of berserkers, right? Even if he appeared, so what? Even if he's very strong, so what? *TCH, this Su Ming you met in the land of berserkers is also a stupid lunatic. If he had stayed in Morning Dao sect obediently and hid his name, he wouldn't have exposed himself, but now he's just an idiot. The third prince laughed loudly. The area sank into a strange, dead silence. Besides the battle in the sky, the silence from all the cultivators in Morning Dao sect turned into the words spoken by the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World, which had been in their minds, as well as at the moment. It was especially so for sect master of the 3. Their expressions had become unprecedentedly solemn. Stupid, huh? As he fell back, Su Ming saw Yu Xian clenching her face and blood trickling out of the corners of her mouth with his bloodshot eyes. His soul was burning, and everything about him was boiling. As he mumbled under his breath, an incredibly thick, destructive power erupted from his body with a bang. At the instant the presence that could destroy all lives in the universe erupted, Su Ming's real, physical body started trembling furiously on the altar formed by the countless fragments of continents and runes in an area that was incredibly far away from them. He was still in true Morning Dao world, but at that moment, he was in the territory of the Immortals Union. What could be described as throwing caution to the wind? What could be described as throwing caution to the wind? Madness could sometimes be used to describe a person, but there was one word that was even stronger than madness. It was a word that could perfectly express the foundation of someone throwing caution to the wind. That was caring, because they cared about something or someone for that person, for that thing, and for that thing, they could overturn the universe, and they could do anything. To some people, this care was known as their reverse scale. Stupid? Perhaps. I'm not an incredibly smart person either. So what if I expose my identity? So what if I expose everything? The red in Su Ming's eyes gradually disappeared, and his crimson hair slowly returned to normal. He had regained his rationality from his madness, but in the depths of his heart, there was a sense of care that was several thousands of times stronger than the madness he had felt when his hair was red. There were only a few people he cared about in his life. Yu Xian had been deeply imprinted in Su Ming's heart since the kiss in the past, and she became one of the few people he cared about in his life. She likes me. If I can't even protect her, then even if I control Morning Dao's sect, will it be worth it? In a person's life, there will always be a few people who will persist without hesitation, even if they have to give up everything. Determination, determination. The red in Su Ming's eyes might have faded away, but they had turned into a resolute determination. It filled his heart, causing a barrier in his body to shatter with a bang. As it did so, the three mountains illuminating the moon appeared in the sky behind Su Ming, right before all the cultivators' eyes in the area. The huge moon and the three-colored light flowed about, causing all the cultivators in the area to suck in a sharp breath. It was especially so for the four people who were closing in on Su Ming. Almost at the instant they launched their attacks, a presence erupted from Su Ming's body and swept out in all directions with a bang. Once it crashed into the four people, it forced them to continuously move back. Their expressions changed drastically, and disbelief appeared on their faces. The power of manifesting palms. This is the power of the world that all almighties will stir when they manifest their power in Mastery Realm. This person, the strength he showed just now has long since surpassed those in Mastery Realm. How could he possibly manifest the power of manifesting palms? Lunar Culpa Realm. This person isn't a cultivator in Mastery Realm. He's in Lunar Culpa Realm. What a huge moon. What cultivation method does he practice? How could he fight against almighties while in Lunar Culpa Realm? The four people's breathing quickened. As they fell back, the shock on their faces could not be hidden, because in the depths of their hearts, a terrifying thought rose in their minds. He can fight against almighties while in Lunar Culpa Realm. If he himself has reached Mastery Realm, then just how strong would he be? At that moment, not only did the expressions of the four people change drastically, even old Yu and Ming, who had been wary of Zhu Yu Kai while fighting against him, narrowed their eyes, and shock appeared on their faces. Reverend Zilong from the Fourth True World also stood up swiftly. There was disbelief on his face, and his breathing quickened. Only at that moment did he come to a swift realization that Su Ming was just in Lunar Culpa Realm. He had not intentionally revealed his level of cultivation in the past, and had not been hiding it. He was truly just in Lunar Culpa Realm. A powerful light shone in the eyes of the old man and blue beside Reverend Zilong. When he stared at Su Ming, great praise and admiration gradually appeared in his eyes. There might have been quite a number of people from Morning Dao sect who had seen Su Ming's Lunar Culpa Realm before, but at that moment, The presence spreading out from his body was becoming stronger at an astonishing speed. Sect Masters Ri, Yu, and Xing cast each other a glance, and they saw the brilliant light in each other's eyes, as well as the fact that they were tempted. He can fight against almighties in Lunar Culpa Realm. If this person reaches Mastery Realm, the breathing of the three quickened at the same time, and the light in their eyes immediately shone brilliantly. Dynast Dao Kong. The Morning Dao sect disciples on the Azure Dragon's continent might have been slightly hesitant because of the third prince's words, but at that moment, someone immediately spoke up with excitement in his voice. Once that voice appeared, all the cultivators on the Azure Dragon's continent and the 9 million cultivators in the galaxy below gradually fused with their voices and turned into a wave of sound that surged into the heavens and reverberated in the air. Dynast Dao Kong. Dynast Dao Kong. Their voices continued echoing in the air, turning into a loud bang that shook the sky and earth. The weather changed, and the sound swept out in all directions. Su Ming threw his head back and let out a long roar that shocked all the cultivators in the area. As he roared, the gigantic moon behind him crumbled with a bang. As it did so, countless fragments gathered together in the air behind Su Ming. As they gathered together, they formed a matchless sun that far surpassed all the other cultivators in Solar Culpa Realm. It was an unparalleled sun that had never been seen before, and there was a high possibility that no one would be able to see it in the future. That sun still had 3 colors. The red color of madness, the golden color of the sacred deity, and the gray color of extreme cold caused it to become the pinnacle in all the people's eyes. The 3 mountains illuminating the moon also turned into the 3 mountains illuminating the sun. Protect care. Su Ming stood in the matchless sun, when the intensity of his cultivation base erupting forth shook the universe. He gained an epiphany in his head. He had been able to reach a breakthrough in his level of cultivation because of his protection. Care was a form of power, and the protection formed by that power was a madness that could destroy everything. This was an epiphany that had settled down after Su Ming's multiple changes of heart. It allowed him to somewhat understand Su Xianyi's protection at that moment. The source of power doesn't come from the universe, neither does it come from space, and neither does it come from the world beyond. Borrowing power from the world beyond is, in the end, an external power. True power comes from the heart, the will, and a person's own body. It's just like how I don't need power from the world beyond me to prevent my own power from spreading outwards, but my own will. It's just like how I don't need power from the world beyond me to cause a rebound, but my own body. True power, true great Tao, or perhaps the essence of Saint Defire Expanse Cosmos is one of them. But no matter which one it is, the final path is to train one's own Atman. Su Ming came to an understanding. At the instant he understood this, an even stronger ripple of power erupted from Su Ming's body with a bang. The eruption of his cultivation base caused the sun that had just formed to look as if it was about to melt. At the same time, the presence that belonged to those in Mastery Realm appeared. Mastery Realm is known as the palm, because the palm is a form of protection, using the palm to protect the precious thing in the palm. Su Ming mumbled. At the same time, in the region belonging to the Immortals Union, Su Ming's real physical body's right hand curled up as if he was about to clench it into a fist. The 3rd chapter, to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1208. He gathered the power in his palm. An uproar instantly broke out in the area. All the cultivators who saw this felt their hearts tremble, especially the disciples from Morning Dao sect. Their spirits were lifted, and they continuously shouted Dao Kong's name. Their voices reverberated in the air and shook the entire area. All almighties who step into Mastery Realm will have the power to gather their palms, as if the universe has descended. Under this power, even those in Death Realm will not be able to harm them in the slightest. The almighties at this moment are protected. The four almighties who had retreated in front of Su Ming had shock hidden in their sullen expressions. When they retreated together, they immediately sent divine thoughts to each other. Damn it, how could this person reach a breakthrough and become an almighty at this moment? Judging by his physical body and combat abilities, I thought that he had become a master of fate, lives, and death a long time ago. We can't attack this person, but similarly, he can't walk out of the power of the universe descending on him. He can only wait until he gathers the power in his palm and completely steps in a mastery realm. Accumulate power. The moment he steps out will be the moment of his death. The four of them gritted their teeth and glared at Su Ming. Killing intent appeared on their faces, and their presences continued rising. Even though they were wary of Su Ming's level of cultivation after he stepped in a mastery realm, they were still four people, and they were all old monsters who had been in Mastery Realm for many years. They had a certain degree of confidence that they could kill Su Ming. After all, in their eyes, no matter how strong Su Ming was, he had only just stepped in a Mastery Realm. It was not as if he did not have a chance to kill him while his foundation was not firm. They were not the only ones who stopped attacking. Old Yu and Ming and Zhu Kai also spread out and looked towards Su Ming, who was enveloped by a huge vortex and exuding waves of powerful, mighty pressure. He looked as if he had fused with the universe. The eyes of the sect masters from Morning Dao sect, as well as sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing, sparkled as they looked over. Yu Xian stared at Su Ming, who had thrown his head back and let out a low roar in the vortex. There was a smile on her face, and there was a hint of pride in it. She was proud of Su Ming. The third prince's expression was dark and gloomy. Great jealousy appeared in his eyes. He longed to become an almighty, but when he saw Su Ming step in a mastery realm with his own eyes, a cold, dark look appeared in his eyes. All the people's gazes fell on Su Ming, and he could clearly sense his level of cultivation continuously rising at an incredibly terrifying speed. The huge sun that had just formed behind him started melting as his cultivation base erupted. As it melted, it gradually shrank. From a distance, it looked as if it had turned into a huge fist with 5 fingers clenched into a fist. At the same time, almost at the instant the fist-like sun stopped melting, Su Ming's incessantly rising cultivation base came to a swift halt, as if he had run into an invisible bottleneck, and his cultivation base crashed into it. At the instant a shudder ran through Su Ming's body, quite a number of people immediately focused their gazes on him. He's starting to manifest his fingers. If he wants to break through Solar Culpa Realm and step into Mastery Realm, he will need to manifest his fingers. Based on a person's potential and accumulation of power, the number of fingers they can manifest will be different. That's right. In the past, the 3 of us manifested 4.5 fingers, and that was something that had practically never happened before in Morning Dao sect. It's not that there aren't people who can manifest 5 fingers right after they step in a mastery realm, but they are far too few in number. There are only a few people who can do so in a true world over the course of countless years. I wonder how many fingers this Dao Kong can manifest. Sect Masters Ri, Yu, and Xing from Morning Dao sect cast each other a glance and sent their thoughts to each other. Old Yu and Ming from True Sacredine World had cold sneers on their lips at that moment. With their level of cultivation, they were only slightly wary of Chong He. As for Su Ming, since they dared to come to this place, it meant that they were not wary of him. Naturally, they had something that could fight against the 5th kiln, which was why when they saw Su Ming about to manifest his fingers, they could still smile coldly. This child has already reached his limit by manifesting 3 fingers. When the 2 old men spoke flatly, a long string of laughter came from the 4th true world. The voice of the old man in blue echoed in the air. Why don't you make a bet? I'll bet that the number of fingers this Dao Kong can manifest will surpass the 3 fingers you 2 spoke of. Do you dare to make the bet? Old Yu and Ming turned around and looked at the old man in blue from the 4th true world. Their expressions were slightly dark, but there was wariness hidden within them. They let out a cold harumph. At the instant, all sorts of expressions appeared on the faces of the people in the area. A shocking bang suddenly came from where Su Ming was. Su Ming's expression twisted. The bottleneck was like a membrane. If he could not break through it, it would be difficult for him to step into Mastery Realm. A glint appeared in his eyes, and his cultivation base erupted from his body, turning into an indescribable wave of impact that swept up all his power in his body and charged towards the invisible membrane with a bang. Shocking sounds spread out from his body in all directions. Under that impact, Su Ming could clearly sense the invisible membrane showing signs of shattering. After a moment, booming sounds surged into the sky, and the membrane crumbled. At the instant it did so, Su Ming's cultivation base rose madly once again. His long hair danced in the air, and a powerful light shone in his eyes. The air around him distorted. The vortex formed by the power of the universe descending on him grew even larger at that moment. At the same time, the gigantic sun behind him stretched out a finger like a hand clenched into a fist as Su Ming's cultivation base erupted from his body. The first finger was unleashed. A power that was several times stronger than before swept through Su Ming's body. It spread out and let out deafening booming sounds. Su Ming turned his head around in the vortex and cast a glance at the vermilion bird's continent beneath him, where the third prince stood with a sullen expression on his face while he was enveloped by the screen of light. A ruthless glare shone in Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his right hand, and without any hesitation, he pointed at the vermilion bird's continent through the air. At the same time, as booming sounds surged into the sky, the vortex where Su Ming was immediately hummed. The shadow of a finger swiftly gathered together and turned into a gigantic finger. It was several thousands of feet big, and, at the instant it appeared, it gained corporeal form. Not a single trace of it could be seen as an illusion could be seen. The gigantic finger was the first finger of the 5 fingers in Mastery Realm Su Ming had just formed. He could not wait to have all 5 fingers spread out, so he was about to attack. When he pointed, booming sounds reverberated in the air, and the huge finger charged towards the vermilion bird's continent. It was so quick that an arc that looked like an air explosion appeared in front of the finger. The arc even showed signs of burning, as if there was a barrier between them, and the finger was about to move through it. In the face of the power of the finger, a cold sneer appeared at the corners of the third prince's lips, along with derision. He naturally knew that when the power of the universe descended, no one would be able to harm Su Ming, but similarly, Su Ming would not be able to move through the power of the universe to attack others. This was a trajectory that could not be changed. That was why the finger was incredibly ludicrous in his eyes. However, the moment the derisive look appeared in his eyes, disbelief appeared on his face, and his expression changed drastically. The expressions of all the people in the area changed at the same time, including Sect Masters Ri, Yu, and Xing, Old Yu and Ming, Reverend Zilong, and the old man in blue who still had an indifferent expression on his face. In that instant, all of their pupils constricted, because, as Su Ming's huge finger rubbed against the power of the universe, its speed became slower, as if it could not move through the invisible power of the universe to bring out its destructive might. Suddenly, the slightly larger of the 2 abyss dragons that surrounded the area looked back and forth. All those who were looked at by it would feel as if all the items in their storage bags had been seen through. It let out a fake cough and cursed under its breath. It lifted its dragon claw and seized the air gently. Immediately, the power of the universe that surrounded Su Ming's huge finger and prevented it from rushing out instantly disappeared. At the instant it disappeared, Su Ming's finger shot out with a bang. With a speed that was even faster than when it was in the power of the universe, it charged towards the vermilion bird's continent and the third prince, who was enveloped by the screen of light with a madness that made it seem as if it wanted to destroy the world. This is impossible. With their levels of cultivation and composure, even Sect Masters Ri, Yu, and Xing were shocked at that moment, and it was even more so for the others. It was especially so for the 4 almighties protecting the third prince. They had been accumulating their power, but the sudden change caused their expressions to change drastically. They were the third prince's guards, and they absolutely could not allow anyone to harm the third prince right before their eyes, or else it would mean that they were useless, and what awaited them would be the punishment from the Emperor of Abyss True World. Without any hesitation, the four of them attacked together. They turned into four long arcs that charged towards Su Ming's incoming vast finger. A loud bang shot up and stirred up a powerful wave of impact that spread outwards with the spot where they crashed into each other. Ripples spread out, and a large number of cracks appeared in the air. Su Ming's finger flashed a few times before it slowly disappeared from the people's eyes. However, the price for making Su Ming's first finger disappear was that the four almighties tumbled backwards at the same time. They coughed up blood continuously, and the almighty in Mastery Realm with the lowest level of cultivation was torn to pieces with a bang. His body and soul were both destroyed. One died, and three were injured. This was the terrifying power Su Ming displayed once he executed his first finger in Mastery Realm. This isn't fair. The remaining three retreated swiftly. As their faces turned pale, one of them let out an indignant roar. They could not injure Su Ming because of the power of the universe, but Su Ming could ignore the power of the universe. With one finger, he killed one of them, and with one finger, he heavily injured the other three. This was indeed unfair, but what answered him was the abyss dragon that was the bald crane. It swung its butt, turned around, and when it winked at the person, it let out a curse. Darn it all. As the bald crane spoke, perhaps because it had swung its butt a little too much just then, the moment it said those words, it immediately turned around and used its abyss dragon's butt to charge outside. And with a bang, there was a loud bang. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1209. It killed one person, but it shocked all the people in the area. Once the finger disappeared, the area fell into dead silence. All gazes were gathered on the abyss dragon that was the bald crane. This was the first time the abyss dragon had received so much attention. A smug look appeared on its face, and it let out a few fake coughs, but just as it was about to say a few simple words of modesty, another shocking rumble came from the vortex where Su Ming was. That rumble seemed to be able to suppress heartbeats, causing the hearts of all those in the area to tremble at the instant it appeared. At the same time, Su Ming sensed that his cultivation base had touched the second invisible barrier as it rose explosively. It was the second bottleneck, the gate to activate the second finger in Mastery Realm. If he could break it, he could make the second finger appear on his son, and Su Ming's cultivation base would instantly increase exponentially again. If he could not break it, then while he would still be in Mastery Realm, he would not have attained completion. He might still be much stronger than before, but he could have become even stronger. Once I activate the second finger, I will attack again. Let's see how many of you will be left. When Su Ming's ghastly voice came from the vortex, all his cultivation base erupted from his body and charged at the invisible barrier with a loud bang. Once, twice, and for the third time, the booming sound were even more intense than before. At the instant they shook the sky, the huge sun behind, Su Ming swiftly formed the second finger. Once two fingers appeared on the sun that seemed to have turned into a fist, Su Ming's cultivation base rose again. A terrifying presence spread out from his body, and the presence of just two fingers was already equivalent to that of a normal cultivator who had attained great completion in Mastery Realm. After all, this was just the presence of Su Ming's cultivation base, not his physical power. Before this, his physical power had surpassed his cultivation base by far too much, but now, the gap between them was swiftly being closed, which meant that Su Ming's true combat abilities had also reached an astonishing degree. Immediately after, almost at the instant Su Ming activated the second finger in Mastery Realm, he lifted his right hand, formed two fingers into the shape of a sword, and swept them swiftly towards the Vermilion Birds continent. With a bang, two huge fingers pressed together beyond the vortex where Su Ming was. They manifested, and with an even stronger presence than before, they shot through the power of the universe and charged towards the Vermilion Bird's continent. The faces of the three almighties outside the third prince's screen of light on the Vermilion Bird's continent turned pale at that moment. At the instant despair appeared in their eyes, madness burned in them. The three of them threw their heads back and roared at the sky at the same time. Their souls, flesh, blood, and cultivation bases burned at that instant. It was especially so for the Almighty, who had already mastered his own laws of fate. His burning caused his cultivation base to instantly rise to a level that was infinitesimally close to life realm. The three of them turned into three long arcs that charged towards Su Ming's two fingers in the sky. Loud bangs shook the sky and earth. As the breathing of the people in the area quickened, Su Ming's two fingers disappeared, but the price was the Almighty in Mastery Realm instantly crumbled and turned into an endless amount of powder. The other Almighty in Fate Realm coughed up a dozen something mouthfuls of blood. His body instantly withered, and his eyes dimmed. When he retreated about thousands of feet away, a bang shot up, and he could no longer rely on coughing up blood to suppress his injuries. His body was torn to shreds. The last Almighty, who had burned his soul in exchange for a level that was infinitesimally close to life realm, shuddered. When he moved back, his presence grew dim, and the blood he coughed up dyed his robes red. He might not have died, but his organs had been crushed. However, due to his great level of cultivation and the burning of his soul, he did not immediately die. When he moved back, he seized the air with his right hand without any hesitation. Immediately, most of the medicinal cores were swallowed by him. There was madness in his eyes. He believed that as long as he was not instantly killed, then with his level of cultivation, he would be able to last until he returned to the Emperor of Abyss True World. Because of that, he might still have a chance to survive. He was betting that Su Ming would not be able to manifest the third finger. The power of his cultivation base has already reached great completion in Mastery Realm, and he's only manifested two fingers. This Dao Kong, Sect Masters Ri, Yu, and Xing cast each other an incredibly solemn glance. Once his physical power fused with his cultivation base, those two fingers reached a power that can crush those in Fate Realm. It's equivalent to a strike from those in the initial stage of Life Realm. This child's future is limitless. He's someone who could devour a striking lance. I thought that he was already in Mastery Realm at that time, but by the looks of it now, we underestimated him. The density of his blood is golden. If he can manifest the third finger, we can. Sect Masters Ri, Yu, and Xing's eyes shone at each other. A strange light appeared on their faces, but it soon disappeared. They had reached a common understanding. If this child can manifest the third finger, then in the future, Morning Dao Sect will have another supremely powerful warrior. The old man in blue from the fourth true world shook his head and said calmly. By his side, a glint appeared in Reverend Zilong's eyes. But he has caused a great disaster. It doesn't matter whether it's Sacredine Sect or the Emperor of Abyss True World, this is a great disaster for him. The three great true worlds won't be able to fight against each other. They'll just be arguing. Even if this Dao Kong kills the third prince, Morning Dao Sect will just have to pay a little more of a price. And look at the three old coots, Ri, Yu, and Xing. The three of them were sending divine thoughts to each other just now. I might not have been able to hear what they were saying, but I could guess that they were tempted. They were tempted by Dao Kong. Besides, I'm also very interested in this Dao Kong. The old man in blue smiled faintly. As his eyes sparkled, some sort of thought rose in his heart. At the instant all the people were immersed in their own thoughts, all their thoughts suddenly disappeared. Their gazes gathered on Su Ming, and the booming sounds reverberated in the air once again. This time, Su Ming's roar was mixed in the booming sounds. At the instant he threw his head back and roared, the sun behind him immediately manifested the third finger. Veins popped up on Su Ming's face. The appearance of the third finger might have seemed simple, but in truth, he had used his cultivation base to strike it nearly 100 times before he managed to break the invisible barrier. If it was not because his body had been incredibly strong to begin with, then this sort of attack would have definitely caused his body to crumble. This was one of the reasons why there were not many people who could manifest the third finger in the four great true worlds. In truth, almost all of the Almighties in Mastery Realm Su Ming had met previously had only manifested one or two fingers. As of then, he had yet to meet anyone who had manifested the third finger. After all, even if they had only manifested one finger, they could still reach great completion in Mastery Realm and step into Fate Realm. However, at the instant they stepped into Mastery Realm, the distance between them had already widened. They were both in Mastery Realm and had both reached great completion, but those who had manifested four fingers could perfectly kill those in Mastery Realm with only one finger. Almost at the instant Su Ming manifested the third finger, he lowered his head swiftly. There was madness in the killing intent in his eyes, and it was a form of determination formed from extreme care. It was the source of Su Ming's power that allowed him to reach a breakthrough and become an almighty. It was a care that allowed him to use his palm to protect everything, to protect the precious things in his palm, and to not let them be harmed. I like to see how you will fight back. Su Ming lifted his right hand and swept three of his fingers forward. As the world roared, three gigantic fingers appeared in the air beyond the vortex. They were thousands of feet long, and at that moment, a power that looked as if they wanted to cover the sky appeared within them. As loud rumbles rose into the air, they charged towards the Vermilion Bird's continent. Anguish appeared on the face of the only remaining Almighty in Fate Realm who had burned his soul. There was despair in his eyes. At the instant Su Ming manifested the third finger, he knew that he could not stop him. He could only become a stone that he crushed to block his path forward when Dynast Dao Kong rose to power in Morning Dao Sect. As he laughed brokenly, the Almighty in Fate Realm also knew that he had no way out. He threw his head back and roared. At the instant Su Ming's three gigantic fingers closed in on him, he rushed out. At the instant he came into contact with the three fingers, he chose to self-destruct. Booming sounds reverberated in the sky. The self-destruction of the Almighty from the Emperor of Abyss True World could not make Su Ming's three illusory fingers stop for even a single moment. They instantly landed on the Vermilion Bird's continent, and in an instant, they crashed into the black screen of light where the third prince's expression had completely changed. He had seized Yu Xian and placed her in front of him. The entire Vermilion Bird's continent shuddered. The Vermilion Bird, holding up the continent, let out a pained wail. Its body sank swiftly, causing the continent to sink several thousands of feet. As the Vermilion Bird screamed in pain, it flew out swiftly and no longer held up the continent. Instead, it stared at Su Ming with a terrified gaze. Without the Vermilion Bird to lift it up, the continent did not fall. Instead, the black screen of light around the third prince swiftly spread outwards. In an instant, it enveloped the entire continent, causing Su Ming's three fingers to crumble as they tumbled backwards. Ha! With my father's protection around, how could you possibly break it? I will remember what happened today. The third prince laughed loudly. He lifted his right hand and pressed it against the ground. Immediately, threads of light appeared on the ground before him. As they rotated, they branded the ground. As the threads of light swam about, they formed a teleportation rune on the ground at an incredible speed. This rune will need 30 breaths from the start to finish being set up. I will need 20 breaths from the moment I step in to the moment I leave. Su Ming, you only have 50 breaths. You can only watch me leave with this be *TCH. The third prince laughed madly, and derision as well as derision appeared in his eyes. I won't need 50 breaths. A threatening, freezing glare appeared in Su Ming's eyes. At the instant he said those words, he bit the tip of his tongue and coughed up a mouthful of blood. At the same time, he lifted his right hand and swept it through his body, turning it into blood-red brands. Once Su Ming grabbed them, he pushed them at the center of his brows. With a bang, Su Ming used the brand formed by his blood essence to stimulate his current potential and reduce the amount of time he needed to crash into the barrier. Even though the price for doing so was that his body would have to withstand an even greater impact, as a king, Su Ming did not care about it. In the midst of the booming sounds, the fourth finger appeared on the sun behind Su Ming. The fourth finger. The breathing of all the cultivators in the area quickened at that moment. Su Ming used his actions to tell all of them that he had risen to power in one go. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 12:10. The fourth finger appeared on the fist-like sun in Mastery Realm. Once Su Ming lifted his right hand and swung it in the direction of the Vermilion Bird's continent, a four-fingered palm manifested in front of him beyond the vortex formed by the power of the universe. With a mighty pressure that caused the hearts of all the people in the area to tremble and a will that wanted to destroy the universe for the sake of protection, the four-fingered palm charged towards the Vermilion Bird's continent with a loud bang, as if it had replaced the world. Before it even closed in, the sky shattered layer by layer under the four gigantic fingers. The black screen of light on the Vermilion Bird's continent shone with a dazzling light. A cold sneer appeared at the corners of the Emperor of Abyss True World's third prince's lips, but his slightly trembling gaze showed that he was terrified at that moment. Boom! A shocking sound reverberated in the air. At the instant it spread out in all directions, the third prince's arrogant laughter immediately spread out. The black screen of light distorted violently, and at the instant Su Ming's four-fingered palm crashed into it. It crumbled and tumbled backwards, shattering into pieces. What can you do to me? Su Ming, do you care about this (TCH? As the third prince laughed in a conceited manner, he lifted his right hand and seized Yu Xian's neck, lifting her frail body high into the air. He tightened his grip, causing pain to appear on Yu Xian's face, but she still forced herself to maintain a smile. She did not want Su Ming to see her sad expression. You care about this (TCH? Huh. Even if you do, so what? She's in my hands. If you have the ability, you can break the Emperor of Abyss True World screen of light in a few dozen breaths and save this (TCH. Su Ming, if you can't do it in a few dozen breaths, then I will bring this (TCH home. But if you're willing to kneel down and beg me to destroy your cultivation base and dig out your heart as a gift to me, then I will consider giving this (TCH, who is already close to death and will not be able to live for more than 100 years after leaving the Emperor of Abyss True World, to you before she dies. Bring it on. The third prince squeezed his right hand, and veins popped up on his face. As he laughed madly, he looked at Yu Xian, who was enduring the pain, then at Su Ming, whose eyes were bloodshot beyond the screen of light. He felt incredibly delighted, and his laughter became even more savage. He saw the red in Su Ming's eyes and sensed some sort of madness in Su Ming's body, but he did not care. As long as the screen of light was not broken, he would be able to return to the Emperor of Abyss True World in a few dozen breaths. If Su Ming dared to chase after him to the Emperor of Abyss True World in such an arrogant manner, he would let him know what despair was. Su Ming had originally recovered from the destructive crimson, but at that moment, under the third prince's provocation, blood capillaries instantly covered his eyes. At the instant they shone with a red glare, he stared at Yu Xian, who was clearly in great pain but was trying her best to smile. As he stared at the mischievous girl in the past, sharp stabs of pain shot through Su Ming's heart. He could also see that while Yu Xian was doing her best to smile, her eyes were filled with determination, as well as a deep determination. It was a determination that if we can't be together, then I will wait for you in the underworld. This pain made Su Ming's heart feel as if it was being torn apart, and it was difficult for him to recover from it. Everything in his eyes turned blood red. There was only one thought in his mind, and that was to break the screen of light, kill the third prince, and save Yu Xian. In the midst of his madness and concern, Su Ming did not say a single word. He swiftly rushed forward and left the vortex formed by the power of the universe. At the instant he stepped out, he lifted his right hand, and his cultivation base roared as he charged towards the fifth finger in Mastery Realm. Su Ming charged forward again and again, but even if his body was trembling violently, he still could not break the invisible barrier formed by the fifth finger. It was as if there was always something lacking. Activate the fifth finger. A red glare shone in Su Ming's bloodshot eyes, and he patted his storage bag with his left hand. Immediately, the poisonous wasp containing the God Ascension nectar appeared on his palm. At the instant Su Ming clenched his left fist, the wasp's poisonous sting stabbed into the flesh on his palm. At the same time, the God Ascension nectar surged into Su Ming's body. Once it entered his body, it swam through his blood and spread out to fuse with his cultivation base, causing a loud bang to ring out in Su Ming's head. Another charge was launched in a frenzy once more. But he was still lacking a little. However, Su Ming, who no longer possessed any rationality, sent a divine thought to the poisonous wasp in his left hand to pour in more God Ascension nectar. Immediately, an amount of God Ascension nectar that was hundreds of times greater than what he had used to attract the waves of tears in Divine Essence Star Ocean rushed into his body. Booming sounds reverberated in Su Ming's mind, and they were like thunder that shook his soul to the point that it felt like it was about to shatter. At the same time, a presence that could make all the cultivators in the area, and even the old man in blue from the fourth true world, immediately stand up with a change in expression erupted from Su Ming's body with a bang. As it erupted, Su Ming circulated all his cultivation base. At that moment, he might seem normal, but in truth, as his cultivation base erupted and the God Ascension nectar spread through his body continued swelling up. This swelling could not be seen with the naked eye, but Su Ming had a feeling that in less than 3 breaths, his body would explode from being filled to the brim. During the first breath, Su Ming bled from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. He circulated all his cultivation base and continuously rammed against the invisible barrier of the fifth finger, using this method to forcefully break it. During the second breath, an indescribable pain spread out from within his body, causing Su Ming to feel as if every single part of his body was about to shatter. Sweat broke out on his skin, and a strong sense of danger rose in his heart. It was a sense of death. Once his body crumbled, then his physical body would not be the only thing that would disappear. His soul would also disappear. This was a choice between death or breaking the fifth finger. A rational person would definitely not do this, but at that moment, there was no longer any rationality within Su Ming. There was only extreme care within him. With great difficulty, he circulated all his cultivation base and continuously rammed against the invisible barrier. At the instant the third breath arrived, Su Ming's body surpassed its limit as it continued swelling up in an invisible manner. His body started showing signs of shattering, and he looked like a water ball that was about to explode. A loud bang rang out. What exploded was not Su Ming's body. Instead, once a large amount of water was poured into the water ball, it would either explode or it would break through its bottleneck. At the instant booming sounds reverberated in the air and shook the sky and earth, the shadow of the fifth finger appeared on the sun behind Su Ming. At the instant it appeared, the crazed power in Su Ming's body seemed to have found an outlet and surged into the illusory fifth finger, causing it to instantly gain corporeal form. With a loud bang, it appeared in the sky, right under the shocked gazes of countless cultivators in the area. The sun was like a fist, and all 5 fingers were stretched out. By the looks of it, it was no longer a sun, but a palm with an open fist. At the same time, in the region of the Immortals' Union, Su Ming's clenched right hand shone with a tricolored light. It surrounded his right hand and instantly filled his entire right arm. As it shuddered slightly, a power that came from his physical body seemed to have woken up because of it. That palm symbolized protection. It symbolized Su Ming's determination. It also symbolized the protection he cared for and the epiphany he had gained. The area around the anointment ceremony in Morning Dao sect was abuzz with noise. A powerful light shone in the eyes of the old man in blue from the fourth true world. There was a form of concentration contained within that light, along with a great sense of admiration. His breathing quickened, revealing the shock in his heart. Reverend Z long sucked in a sharp breath. There was still disbelief on his face, but among all the people in the area, he was probably the only one who knew about Su Ming's previous madness, because he knew that Su Ming had got ascension nectar. This was a secret he had never told anyone. It was precisely because he knew about it and had once absorbed a small amount of it that he knew that Su Ming had managed to forcefully manifest his fifth finger, even though he had clearly been unable to do so just then. When he remembered how terrifying the god Ascension Nectar was, respect appeared in Reverend Zilong's eyes. When old Yu and Ming from True Sacredine World saw Su Ming manifest his fourth finger, their hearts let out a thump, but they could still remain calm. Yet when they saw Su Ming manifest his fifth finger, both of them sucked in deep breaths. Once they cast each other a glance, they could see the complicated look in each other's eyes. They knew that once Su Ming manifested his fifth finger, unless he had a large amount of concrete evidence to prove that he was not Dao Kong, all sects and clans would definitely not give up on a person who could manifest the fifth finger, even if they were suspicious of his origins, because as long as this sort of disciple did not die prematurely, then his chances of stepping into Death Realm would be much higher than those of others. In fact, there was even a slight possibility that he would surpass Death Realm and step into Sublime Paragon Realm. To all true worlds, this was an indescribable treasure, and they would definitely not give up on it. In fact, even if they had concrete evidence, they could still change it. Of course, the prerequisite was that this person was not their enemy. And it was clear that Su Ming had become a dynast, killed tens of thousands of people from the Immortals Union, and even returned from the barren lands of divine essence. All of these things made it certain that he was not an enemy in Morning Dao sect's eyes, because to them, their greatest enemy was the Immortals Union. More importantly, this person had already received Progenitor Dao Chen's blessing. He had already greeted Progenitor Dao Chen, so everything was no longer a problem. At the instant the sounds of discussion rose in the air, the sun behind Su Ming turned into a palm. Monstrous killing intent and a red glare shone in his eyes. When he lifted his right hand, this time it was not an illusory palm that appeared, but a palm formed by the sun behind him. With a bang, it charged forward, shot through Su Ming's body, and charged towards the Vermilion Bird's continent. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 12:11. This palm strike was Su Ming's full power at that moment. It was the strongest power he could muster. Once he did so, he lifted his right hand and charged forward along with the palm formed by his solar Kulpa realm. This was the greatest release of Su Ming's physical power. It was the strongest power he could muster up in his life after he fused his cultivation base with his physical body. At the same time, a faint, malicious presence spread out from behind Su Ming. It was as if it came from an ancient, ferocious spirit. As it filled the area, it was indistinct, but only Su Ming knew that it was a Kang's presence. It was ancient and malicious. This presence meant that Su Ming's Kang body had erupted forth after it was complete. This strike caused the weather to change. It also made the air look as if it was about to become still. It could only allow Su Ming to charge forward and leave behind a crack that seemed like it could not heal. This strike caused the pupils of all those who saw it to shrink. Their hearts trembled because this strike was no longer something that a cultivator in Mastery Realm could execute, and neither could an Almighty in Fate Realm. It had already surpassed Mastery Realm and Fate Realm to reach Life Realm. Even though it was not the strike of someone who had attained great completion in Life Realm, it was a strike that belonged to those in the middle stage of Life Realm. Perhaps this was not what was terrifying about it. After all, there were only a few cultivators in Death Realm in this place. However, what caused them to be alarmed was that Su Ming's true level of cultivation had only just stepped into Mastery Realm. However, They were alarmed because they did not understand Su Ming. If they did, then they would not be alarmed but shocked. Because if Su Ming could master the laws of fate, then he could make this strike equal to those in the later stage of life realm. If he could retrieve his physical body, then he, who had come to understand the laws of fate, could make this strike have a power that was infinitesimally close to those in death realm. At the instant he stepped into mastery realm and became an almighty, Su Ming could be considered to have truly become strong. He was no longer a weakling, and he was no longer a weak cultivator who could be bullied as they pleased. Anyone who tried to distort their destiny would have to pay a heavy price. The price was so great that even they might not be able to bear it. The attack descended on the shield of light surrounding the vermilion bird continent. The third prince's expression was one of madness. He had absolute confidence in the shield of light, and he was still laughing madly as he held Yu Xian's neck in a death grip. At that moment, the spell formation was almost complete, and dazzling light shone as the third prince threw his head back and roared madly. "This prince is waiting for you here. Come on." What answered him was a monstrous rumble that caused the ears of many of the surrounding cultivators to bleed, and a violent shockwave swept out in all directions. Su Ming's palm with his cultivation base touched the screen of light the Emperor of Abyss True World had left behind for his son. This strike caused the screen of light to instantly distort, and a large number of cracks appeared at the spot where Su Ming's palm with his cultivation base crashed into it. They spread out swiftly, and, as they did so, the screen of light at the top caved in. It was as if it possessed elasticity. As Su Ming's palm, with his cultivation base, continued pressing down, it charged towards the third prince on the vermilion bird's continent through the screen of light. This shocking scene caused the third prince's expression to change. His crazed laughter immediately came to an abrupt halt. At the instant disbelief appeared in his eyes, another loud bang reverberated in the air before dispersing. Su Ming's palm, with his cultivation base, pushed down the screen of light by about 10,000 feet, and as a large number of cracks filled the screen, the palm disappeared. It had used up all its power, but that was all it could do. It could not shatter the screen of light, but at the instant the palm formed by Su Ming's solar culpa disappeared, Su Ming rushed out from behind it. He lifted his right hand and pushed his palm against the sunken screen of light. Booming sounds rose up again. Blood filled Su Ming's eyes, and with madness, his physical power reached its peak. The malicious presence around him shook the sky, and at the instant it touched the sunken screen of light, booming sounds rang out. The screen of light could not bounce back, but was pushed back by Su Ming's right hand, causing it to sink even deeper into the ground. The third prince's face instantly turned pale. He stared at Su Ming in the sky, who was pushing the screen of light towards him. His mind instantly turned blank, and he shuddered. Without any hesitation, he grabbed Yu Xian and swiftly walked into the relocation rune. His face was stark pale, and there was an unprecedented terror on his face. He struck the rune with his left hand. "Damn it! Activate it! Hurry up and activate it!" Cold sweat broke out on the third prince's forehead. A powerful, life-threatening sense of danger rose in his body. With a low growl, he struck the rune with his left hand, and it immediately shone with a dazzling light before it slowly started operating. Blood filled Su Ming's eyes. Pushing the screen of light to sink did not seem too difficult. But it had to be known that the Emperor of Abyss True World's True World had personally branded it on his children. His goal was to prevent outsiders from killing them. The strength of the screen of light was so strong that if it could be easily destroyed, then the princes of the Emperor of Abyss True World would have died a long time ago. Even if Su Ming was at his strongest, he still could not destroy the screen of light. Even if he tried to push it forward, it became even more difficult. He pushed the screen of light to get closer to the ground. He could see Yu Xian, the third prince whom he had to kill, their expressions, and the fear in the third prince's eyes. Su Ming got closer to the ground from an endless distance to 100,000 feet, 10,000 feet, and eventually 1,000 feet. In the third prince's eyes, Su Ming had already arrived, and the rune under his feet was only halfway through its relocation process. He still needed about a dozen breaths before he could be relocated. After all, this was not a normal relocation, but a relocation between true worlds, which was why his speed would be slightly slower. When he saw that Su Ming was about to close in, the third prince's expression twisted. He threw his head back and roared, then grabbed Yu Xian. Just as he was about to throw her to the ground, he was suddenly stunned for a moment before he started laughing loudly. There was a hint of madness in his laughter, along with endless mockery. Su Ming, what can you do to me? You can't break this screen of light. It's better if you're 1,000 feet away. You can see how I leave more clearly. As the third prince laughed, he let out a huge sigh of relief in his heart. He saw Su Ming standing 1,000 feet away in the sky. The sunken screen of light seemed to have reached its limit. Not only did it not continue sinking, it even showed signs of bouncing up. Veins popped up on Su Ming's face. The screen of light was so strong that even if he used his full strength, he could only do so much. If he could not break the screen of light, then he could not take Yu Xian away. It was just as the third prince had said. He could only watch helplessly. The blood-red light in Su Ming's eyes surged into the sky. But no matter how much he rammed against the screen of light, he still could not stop it from slowly rising. Previously, he had been pushing the screen of light, but now he was being pushed by the screen of light. Gradually, the distance between him and the third prince's rune was reduced to 2,000 feet, and it was still continuing. The third prince's crazed laughter reached Su Ming's ears, causing his heart to sting in pain and his body to tremble. Intense pain shot through his right hand, which was supporting the screen of light. He could see that his flesh and blood were turning into a bloody mess, and his bones were continuously being crushed. Compared to the screen of light, it seemed like it would be difficult for him to fight against it for long. I can still become stronger, as long as I can seize my real physical body back. I can become even stronger. I can't accept this. With my level of cultivation and my cultivation, I can't even break the screen of light formed by a divine ability from the Emperor of Abyss True World. I can't accept this. Su Ming threw his head back and let out the most shocking roar he had ever let out since he came to Morning Dao Sect. That roar contained the bewilderment he felt when he was a member of the Berserkers in Dark Mountain, the anguish he felt when he left the Ninth Summit and stepped into the barren lands of Divine Essence, the madness he felt when he narrowly escaped death in Divine Essence Star Ocean, and the endless resentment he felt towards his birth and Su Xianyi. At that moment, all of these things erupted violently in his roar, and within it was also the pain and unwillingness to accept that he could not save Yu Xian. As that roar echoed in the air, it spread through the 9 continents in the first plane, the 99 continents in the second plane, and even the 999 continents in the third plane. It traveled into Dao Ocean and all the dimensions in Morning Dao Sect. In fact, in Su Xianyi's isolation grounds, Su Ming's roar, which was so strong that it had never been heard before, seemed to echo faintly. Su Xianyi shuddered while he was in isolation, but soon he closed his eyes again, and when he did so, he let out a faint sigh. At the instant the roar reverberated in the universe, deafening the 10 million cultivators and filling their hearts with shock. Su Ming's real physical body in the Immortals' Union started trembling furiously. His right hand shone with waves of 3-colored light, and the power that had been slumbering in his real body seemed to have been awakened in an unseen manner by that roar. I want to become stronger. At the instant Su Ming roared, a dazzling and piercing light erupted from the right hand of his real physical body in the Immortals' Union. At the instant it appeared, a large number of figures appeared around his real physical body. But the moment they appeared, before they could even take action, Su Ming's real right hand disappeared in the light. His entire right arm disappeared along with it. At the same time, Su Ming's right hand, which had crashed into the screen of light in Morning Dao Sect, crumbled to pieces with a bang while it was a bloody mess. But at the instant it shattered, a new arm appeared on Su Ming's body at an indescribable speed to replace his previously destroyed right hand. Immediately after, A presence that was even stronger than Su Ming's strongest power gushed out violently from his reborn right hand with a shocking bang. Lightning roared. The wind and clouds moved in reverse. The cold of midwinter, the red light of autumn, and the flames of summer appeared at the same time. Once they intersected with each other, for the first time ever, the presence of spring appeared on Su Ming's right hand. The spring of all life's revival, the final step of moving from death to life, appeared at that instant. At the same time, Su Ming's reborn right hand seized the air in front of him. As the world roared, the light from the rune around the third prince and Yu Xian rotated. At the instant their bodies were about to be relocated, the screen of light blocking Su Ming crumbled with a bang. With an indescribable speed, Su Ming instantly descended. He lifted his right hand and shot through the light from the rune as if he had moved through a true world. He grabbed the third prince, who was in the middle of being relocated, and with a ferocious expression, he yanked him back. My right hand. The last chapter has ended. Tomorrow will be a new chapter. Please give me some money. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 12:12. A shrill scream of pain tumbled out of the mouth of the third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World, who was already halfway through the relocation rune. His scream was filled with terror and great disbelief. He could clearly remember that the third prince had been outside the screen of light just a breath ago, and he was already halfway through the relocation rune. He was in space, and in just a few more breaths, he would be able to return to the Emperor of Abyss True World. All of this happened too quickly. The moment he screamed in pain and disbelief appeared in his mind, he immediately felt as if time was flowing backward before his eyes. His body was grabbed by a power so great that he could not resist it at all. It grabbed the back of his neck and yanked him out of the void created by the transfer formation. At the same time, Su Ming swung his right arm, and immediately blood-red branches stretched out from his right hand, which had sunk deep into the relocation rune. As they spread out, they charged towards Yu Xian, intending to grab her. All of this was supposed to be perfect. During the most critical moment, Su Ming retrieved Destiny's right hand, broke the screen of light from the Emperor of Abyss True World, stopped the arrogant third prince from leaving, and even grabbed Yu Xian, causing her fate to change due to Su Ming's hand. All of this should have been, but fate was unpredictable, and at that moment, due to someone's actions, it changed slightly for Su Ming. Almost at the instant the branches from Su Ming's right hand were about to grab Yu Xian so that she would not be sent back to the Emperor of Abyss True World during the relocation rune. A power Su Ming was familiar with suddenly descended from the air. With extreme ease, it reached into the tunnel formed by the relocation rune, where Su Ming's right hand and Yu Xian were. That power Su Ming was familiar with did not come to help. But at the instant the branches from Su Ming's right hand touched Yu Xian, that power spread outwards. A soundless bang rang in the tunnel formed by the relocation rune, and a ripple that even Su Ming found difficult to fight against erupted from it. When the ripple spread out, it caused the branches Su Ming wanted to grab Yu Xian to tremble and fall backwards, causing Yu Xian's body to be swept away. In an instant, she fused into space and was relocated back to the Emperor of Abyss True World. Su Ming's eyes were bloodshot. Madness erupted violently in his mind. If this power had come from an outsider or the Emperor of Abyss True World, then while Su Ming would have descended into madness, he would definitely not have been so angry. His anger could no longer be described with words. Under that anger, the endless resentment in his heart filled his entire body, causing a black vortex to instantly appear around him. Nothing will happen to her in the Nether's true world, but she isn't suitable for you. A sigh echoed in space. When it gradually disappeared, Su Ming's roar shook the heavens. The vermilion bird's continent let out a bang. As it trembled, the relocation rune started showing signs of crumbling. In an instant, it shattered to pieces, but at the same time, the third prince was dragged out by Su Ming. However, Even though he had dragged out the third prince, Yu Xian had only turned into an afterimage in Su Ming's memories. Su Ming shuddered. He lifted his head and stared at the sky. At the same time, a broken-hearted smile appeared on his face. He let out a shrill laugh, filled with extreme grief and indignation. He mocked the universe, the world, his own bloodline, and himself. There was an air of despair in that laughter, along with an intense pain that made his heart feel as if it was being torn apart. The person who had stopped Su Ming from grabbing Yu Xian was not anyone else. That familiar power belonged to Su Xian Yi, who was also progenitor Dao Chun. Su Ming laughed broken-heartedly. His expression was ferocious, and his body trembled. Once that extreme madness passed, a will of stillness appeared on his body. Stillness was something that had appeared on Su Ming before, but it had only formed when he was in Death region. Then, due to the disappearance of the mask, the will of stillness had also disappeared. At that moment, it appeared again, and besides the gold, crimson, and gray colors in Su Ming's personality, there was also black hair and black eyes. This was the exact same as when he had not changed his 3 personalities, but even though he looked the same, in truth, he had completely changed. At that moment, Su Ming's stillness was because of an intense pain that made him feel as if his heart was being torn apart, an indescribable rage, and a grief that made him feel as if his heart was being devoured. "It doesn't suit me," Su Ming mumbled. He did not roar anymore, neither did he growl. Instead, he stared at the sky, and after a long while he lowered his head. He still had the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World in his right hand. The third prince was shuddering at that moment. In his eyes, Su Ming had already turned into the nightmare he feared the most in his life. He instinctively wanted to tell Su Ming who his father was and use his own method to hide his emotions or beg for mercy. The expressions of sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing changed. Clearly, they had not expected that Su Ming would truly be able to break the screen of light. When they saw the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World in Su Ming's hands, the 3 of them immediately took a step forward at the same time. "Dao Kong, don't kill this person," Sect Master Yu said quickly. The 3 of them had monstrous power, and when they moved, they instantly closed in on Su Ming, but while they were fast, Su Ming was even faster if he wanted to kill someone. To the current Su Ming, the third prince was just like an ant. At the instant he lowered his head and Sect Masters Ri, Yu, and Xing closed in on him, Su Ming clenched his right hand tightly. Immediately, 7 waves of ripples instantly surged into the third prince's body. The first wave instantly shattered all the bones in the third prince's body, and he died from the pain. At the instant the third prince was about to let out a shrill scream of pain, Su Ming pressed his left hand against his mouth and clamped it shut, causing him to be unable to scream and turning it into an even more intense pain. The second wave crushed all the bones in the third prince's body, making him look as if he had turned into a pile of flesh. If Su Ming had not kept his grip on him and let go, the third prince would have definitely fallen to the ground. The third, fourth, and fifth waves of ripples tore the third prince's skin, dissolved his flesh, and evaporated his blood. The sixth and seventh waves crushed the third prince's soul. His soul was forcefully torn apart, causing him to experience indescribable pain in the short span of a few breaths before he died. Su Ming's left hand continued clamping down on the third prince's mouth, not allowing him to make a single sound. When Su Ming let go, the third prince had disappeared. He had turned into ashes and disappeared from Su Ming's hand. Su Ming's eyes were dull, and he remained silent. The breathing of the cultivators in the area quickened at that moment. All of their gazes were trained on Su Ming. After a long while, Su Ming stared at his right hand, and anguish appeared on his face. His right hand could bring forth a power that was infinitesimally close to those who had attained great completion in life realm, which was why he could tear apart the trembling screen of light. But even so, he still could not stop the power Su Xian he had spread out. For the second time, he could not stop Yu Xian's hand. "It doesn't suit me. What right do you have to say that?" Su Ming mumbled. His expression became even duller, but a vast amount of life force spread out from his right hand. It was as if he had been reborn. That presence was incredibly ancient, as if it had been lying dormant for countless years. Su Ming slowly lifted his foot and walked into the sky. He walked out of the vermilion bird's continent. On his way there, he did not even look at his surroundings. He had a place he wanted to go. He wanted to return to true Morning Dao World's isolation grounds and ask Su Xianyi why. Flame Fiend's progenitor immediately took a few steps back in front of Su Ming. His pupils shrank, and he stared at Su Ming with a hint of fear. He could sense that there was something off about Su Ming at that moment, and he could not afford to provoke him in the slightest. Even if Flame Fiend's progenitor only looked as if he was moving forward, and even if he was Su Ming's follower, he still quickly moved back. He was not the only one who moved back. The disciples from Morning Dao sect in the area and the cultivators from True Serene World also moved aside and opened up a path. It doesn't suit me. Thick red appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and it served as a contrast to his black hair. A crazed and unapproachable presence spread out from his body in an unseen manner. Is this how you treat your guests in Morning Dao sect? The third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World came to congratulate you for making your dynast his anointment. He came with a congratulatory gift, but Dao Kong killed him, and all of you just watched. No one tried to stop him. Morning Dao sect? What a sect. I'd like to know what the Emperor of Abyss will do once he learns of this. Old Yu and Ming cast each other a glance, and Old Yu spoke languidly with a fake smile on his face. The expressions of sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing from Morning Dao sect were dark. They might have already made their decision, but at that moment, they still felt that the situation was slightly troublesome. Su Ming had attacked and killed the third prince too quickly. They originally thought that he would not be able to open the screen of light, which would have made things much simpler, but not only had he managed to do so, he had also killed the third prince. This made the situation slightly more complicated. Dao Kong, you went a little overboard in this matter. There were outsiders around. Oh well, go to Dao Ocean and isolate yourself for 500 years. This will be your punishment. As for the Emperor of Abyss True World, sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing sighed in their hearts. With one move, they appeared in front of Su Ming and blocked his path. The three of them looked at each other. All of them were troubled by the fact that they did not know just how great of a price they would have to pay for this. If there were no outsiders around, then they would have just killed the third prince. As for the others, there were plenty of ways to deal with them. But Old Yu and Ming would clearly use this matter to fan the flames, which would immediately make the matter very difficult to deal with. However, compared to the price they would have to pay, the fact that Su Ming had manifested all 5 fingers made him an incredibly valuable resource to Morning Dao sect. This sort of resource was equivalent to a future almighty in Death Realm, which was why they changed their initial view of him. If there were no outsiders around, Su Ming's footsteps came to a halt. He lifted his bloodshot eyes, which were dull and filled with madness. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 12:13. Almost at the instant Su Ming lifted his head, he took a swift step to the side. He was so quick that he instantly charged towards Old Yu and Ming from True Serene World. Su Ming needed to vent his anger. If he could not vent the monstrous resentment and anger in his body, then he would feel as if his body was about to be torn apart. Whether it was his mind or his soul, he needed to vent. He needed to do so, and he needed to kill. At the instant Su Ming left, the expressions of sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing changed. Just as they were about to chase after him, a long string of laughter came from the fourth True World. The old man in blue took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing. With the ghost of a smile on his face, he wrapped his fist in his palm towards the 3 of them. Gentlemen, why don't we have a spar? Ling Hai, what is the meaning of this? Yu Lao frowned and bellowed. I don't have any ulterior motives. I just missed the three of you and want to spar with you. The blue-robed old man smiled and waved his sleeve. A roaring sea appeared and swept toward Elders Ree, Yu, and Xing Blood River Hell. The blue-robed old man formed a seal with both hands, bit the tip of his tongue, and coughed out a large mouthful of blood. The blood immediately fused with the illusionary seawater around him and dyed the sea red. After turning into a sea of blood, it formed a ceiling-like existence, making it difficult for sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing to charge out. Little kid, in order to help you, I've put in a lot of effort. This mouthful of blood seas, sealing blood, took close to 5,000 years of my cultivation to be able to trap those three fellows for an hour single-handedly. You have to work hard, make more mistakes that you can't make up for. It's good that you killed the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World and destroyed the forces of power from True Sacredine World, keeping a lookout over the barren lands of Divine Essence. But that's not enough. You still have to kill Old Yu and Ming, slaughter your way into the Emperor of Abyss True World, and slaughter your way into True Sacredine World. It would be best if we could lure out a sublime paragon of a realm. That way it would be enough. The blue-robed old man's face was a little pale. It was obvious that it was extremely difficult for him to trap Ri, Yu, and Xing. However, his eyes were shining with an intense light. That light was filled with anticipation. When the old man in blue trapped sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing from Morning Dao sect, and the expressions of the people in the area changed, black smoke spread out from Su Ming's body, and he turned into a long arc that charged towards Old Yu and Ming. Courting death. Elder Yu and Ming's eyes lit up. Elder Yu sneered and moved forward. His body was so old that it looked like he had just climbed out of a coffin. He raised his right hand, formed a seal, and pointed forward. Wisps of freezing air instantly rose from the tip of Old Yu's finger, and a vast power that was so ghastly that it seemed as if it could freeze space itself appeared. As cracking sounds rang in the air, countless ice flowers appeared in the space before Old Yu. They connected together and spread out to form a gigantic face of a ghost in front of Su Ming, who was connected by the ice flowers. With a ferocious look on its face, it charged towards Su Ming, a power that was equivalent to those in Death Realm, but slightly lacking in cultivation base, erupted with a bang from the face of the ghost. It was also released from Old Yu's body in a terrifying manner. When Su Ming saw that he was about to crash into the face of the ghost, killing intent shone in his eyes. When he lifted his right hand, an equally astonishing power appeared on it. At the instant it crashed into the face of the ghost, Su Ming clenched his fingers into a fist and threw a punch forward. The world roared, and the universe trembled. Su Ming staggered 3 steps back, but the face of the ghost formed by the ice flowers in front of him instantly crumbled. Su Ming forced himself to stop. When he rushed forward again, a monstrous, malicious presence appeared behind him. It was the manifestation of a Kang's body. Old Yu's pupils shrank. With a cold harumph, he formed a seal with his hands in front of him. Once he quickly pushed his palms together, he pointed at Su Ming. Dark Nether Tribe. A low roar tumbled out of Old Yu's mouth. When he pointed forward, his body looked as if it shuddered. Indistinct, overlapping shadows appeared around him. When they rushed out, they turned into an old man. His body was an illusion, but at the instant he walked towards Su Ming, he lifted his right hand and formed a seal before pointing at the center of his brows. His body immediately let out a bang, and he turned into the face of a ghost that charged towards Su Ming. At the same time, overlapping shadows appeared around Old Yu. This time, 10 shadows flew out at the same time. They were all middle-aged men, and their appearances were the same. They looked rather similar to Old Yu, as if they were Old Yu who was dozens of years younger. At the instant Su Ming crashed into the face of the ghost formed by the old man's shadow, the 10 middle-aged shadows moved and turned into 10 faces of ghosts that charged towards Su Ming. But that was not all, because overlapping shadows appeared for the 3rd time on Old Yu's body. Then 100 shadows instantly rushed out. Each of them was a young man, and they turned into 100 huge faces of ghosts in the sky that charged toward Su Ming, as if there was no end to them. When overlapping shadows appeared for the fourth time on Old Yu's body, the shadows of 500 teenagers appeared. They spread out and surrounded the area, turning into faces of ghosts, causing the sky to look as if it was filled with countless faces of ghosts at that moment. The ghostly faces opened their mouths wide and roared, then rushed towards Su Ming together. Booming sounds did not stop, and when Su Ming saw the endless amount of ghostly faces rushing towards him in a frenzy, a glint appeared in his eyes. The instant they closed in on him, he turned around, lifted his right hand, and struck his chest. This was the rebound he had learned from the predecessor of Dao Ocean. At that moment, Su Ming executed it with his current level of cultivation. Almost at the instant his right hand landed on his chest, a deafening bang that shook the sky and earth reverberated in the air. A wave of impact immediately swept through the area, with Su Ming as its center. As it swept through the area, all the incoming faces of ghosts let out shrill roars, and like fog, they dissipated under the impact of the violent gust of wind. Blood trickled out of the corners of Su Ming's mouth, but he did not wipe it off. With blood on his lips, he threw his head back and let out a roar to vent the anger and resentment in his body. As he roared, Old Ming let out a cold harumph. He moved and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already behind Su Ming. He lifted his right hand and pointed at Su Ming's back in a relaxed manner. At the instant he did so, a layer of dark light appeared at the tip of his finger. That light was strange and enchanting, and it could be vaguely seen that there were countless existences that looked like ghosts in it. They let out soundless roars, and as their expressions twisted, they charged towards Su Ming's back as the old man pointed at him. It was as if they wanted to tear apart Su Ming's body and rush into it to devour his flesh, blood, and soul. Su Ming could not dodge this attack, and he had never thought about dodging it. He turned around swiftly and lifted his right hand to form a seal. When he spread his fingers, a huge palm manifested under Su Ming's feet. As Su Ming clenched his right hand into a fist, the huge illusory palm also clenched around Su Ming and held him in its palm before crashing into Old Ming's incoming finger. As booming sounds surged into the sky, the huge hand holding Su Ming shattered layer by layer until Su Ming was revealed. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, but Old Ming also shuddered. When he took a few steps back, blood trickled out of the corners of his mouth. Yet almost the instant he moved back, a freezing glare shone in Old Yu's eyes. He formed a seal with his hands, and with a bang, nearly 1,000 overlapping shadows flew out of his body. They immediately turned into 1,000 human faces in the area. As they roared, they rushed towards Su Ming. Old Ming also took a step forward. This time, when he lifted his right hand, an oil lamp appeared on his palm. There was a green flame burning on it. He picked up the oil lamp, opened his mouth, and blew at the green flame. It immediately erupted with a bang and turned into a fire phoenix that rushed towards Su Ming with a shrill cry. Old Yu and Ming attacked at the same time. Their killing intent was incredibly resolute, and when they attacked, they executed great divine abilities. There was not a hint of carelessness in them. At that moment, they sealed off Su Ming's front and back, and Old Yu and Ming threw their heads back and roared at the same time. Immediately, a monstrous presence erupted from their bodies. At the same time, 2 green pearls rushed out from the top of their skulls. When they floated in the sky, they spun swiftly and appeared to Su Ming's left and right. The 2 pearls shone and turned into 2 tall figures. They had black skin and bald heads, but the ripples of power equivalent to those in life realms spread out from them. If it was not because their eyes did not have any intelligence and it was clear that they were puppets, people would definitely think that they were cultivators. They were shockingly puppets in life realm that were incredibly rare and incredibly precious in all true worlds. Sacred servant. The pupils of the old man in blue shrank. True Sacredine World was the most famous among the four great true worlds when it came to the art of puppets. And most of the divine abilities in True Sacredine World's Sacredine sect were related to puppets. Creating puppets and using them to train had practically become Sacredine sect's main art. These two puppets were the origin substitutes formed by Yu Ming's cultivation base. Su Ming was surrounded by enemies from all directions, and it was especially so for the two puppets. Even though they were in Life Realm, they held two black blades in their hands. They were entirely black, and there were countless vengeful souls surrounding them. They exuded a presence that made even Su Ming feel great danger. These were two unusual sabers. Booming sounds howled in the air. The divine abilities closed in on Su Ming. At the instant he was surrounded and the murderous attacks from all directions were about to reach him, Su Ming closed his eyes, lifted his right hand, and pushed his palm against the sky. Fifth kiln. Booming sounds surged into the sky. All of Morning Dao sect shuddered. At the same time, a huge crack appeared in the sky. When it was torn apart out of nowhere, the fifth kiln, which had hidden itself once more in divine essence Star Ocean, shuddered. A sea of fire spilled out, and the countless living beings in the kiln threw their heads back and roared. The fifth kiln swayed, and in an instant, it disappeared from divine essence Star Ocean. When it reappeared, it was already in Morning Dao sect. At that moment, the hearts of the 10 million cultivators in all directions trembled. They stared at the crack in the sky and saw the reflection of their pupils. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 12:14. The appearance of the fifth kiln caused all the cultivators in Morning Dao sect to immediately suck in sharp breath. Most of them had never seen the fifth kiln before. The fifth kiln was an incredibly mysterious existence, even in divine essence Star Ocean, and it was filled with unfamiliarity. In fact, if it was not because of the words spoken by the old man who had returned from the barren lands of divine essence, they would have never heard of the fifth kiln before. After all, Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos was too big. The things that cultivators knew were naturally related to their own level of cultivation and experiences. Without a sufficient level of cultivation, it would be impossible for them to know too many secrets. Similarly, without a sufficient amount of experience, it would be impossible for them to come into contact with the fifth kiln. Su Ming was one of them. When he had just stepped into the barren lands of divine essence, he had not known any of this. The others might have come from different backgrounds, but they were all the same when it came to this. The sky rumbled and space distorted. The sound of something being torn apart shook the sky and earth. Countless bolts of lightning swam about in the sky, causing the crack to become larger. Then, the fifth kiln descended with a monstrous presence. Wherever it went, all space would crumble. The entire universe was torn apart, as if there was no power in the world that could stop the fifth kiln from appearing for the first time in true Morning Dao world. A mighty pressure that was so powerful that it could not be described with words spread out violently at that moment. It landed on the hearts of all the cultivators in Morning Dao sect, causing their hearts to beat furiously, and they could clearly sense the pressure that made their bodies tremble. A sea of fire surrounded them. The flames whose color changed as the fifth kiln broke through everything and descended. Even though there was no sea of fire spreading out, the heat that existed in the mighty pressure seemed to be able to melt all gazes, causing all those who saw it to feel piercing pain in their eyes. There were even quite a number of them who could not stop themselves from crying. All of this was due to the appearance of the fifth kiln. The fifth kiln, a glint appeared in old Yu and Ming's eyes. The two of them lifted their heads at the same time and stared at the fifth kiln. Based on the words the Almighty in Life Realm had said when he returned, they knew that Dao Kong could control the fifth kiln. Since he dared to come, it was only natural that he had something he could rely on. I'd like to see whether the fifth kiln truly possesses the might of the legends. Abyss Activation Brush. Old Yu threw his head back and roared. Immediately, a ray of dark light flew out of his mouth. That dark light charged towards the fifth kiln and instantly turned into a writing brush that was surrounded by dark light, but was completely white inside. At the same time, a brilliant light shone in Old Man Ming's eyes. He lifted his left hand and struck his chest. Immediately, a bang came from his back, and his clothes were torn apart to reveal his shriveled skin. His skin was covered in wrinkles, and at the same time, a large number of runic symbols appeared on his skin on their own. As booming sounds shot into the air, Elder Ming coughed up a mouthful of blood. Immediately, a large part of his skin was separated from his physical body, and as it floated, it charged towards the fifth kiln, the Book of Life and Death. Old Ming threw his head back and roared. Immediately, the piece of skin that flew out from his back shone with a piercing black light. It was filled with the will of abyss death, and a mighty pressure spread out with loud bangs. The Book of Life and Death and the Abyss Activation Brush could be considered as a set. It was one of the 4 supreme treasures of true Sacredine World, and it was personally created by the sublime paragon of true Sacredine World. Besides the Book of Life and Death and the Abyss Activation Brush being given to the culpal lord of true Sacredine World, the other 3 supreme treasures were all sunk into Een River to suppress the 9 abysses. The grade of this supreme treasure surpassed that of Xianshan's supreme treasure in the 5th kiln in the past. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that they were not even on the same level. They might have been created by the same sublime paragon, but one of them had been casually created to repay a small debt of gratitude, while the other 4 had been refined meticulously by gathering a large amount of heavenly materials and earthly treasures over many years. They were used to pass down the legacy of a true world, so it was only natural that they could not be compared. Almost at the instant the Book of Life and Death and the Abyss Activation Brush appeared, shock appeared on the faces of a handful of cultivators in the area. Clearly, they had recognized this set of supreme treasures from true Sacredine World. Old Yuan Ming had brought this set of supreme treasures from true Sacredine World and did not care that Su Ming had the 5th kiln. This was the source of their confidence. In their eyes, the 5th kiln might be mysterious, but they had never been to it before. Secondly, the culpal lord of true Sacredine World had also never gone there with his status. However, based on the accounts of those who had survived after the people from true Sacredine World went there, along with true Sacredine World's foundation of power and investigations over the years, they learned most of it. They knew that the 5th kiln's strongest divine ability was the sea of fire that could burn those in Mastery Realm. They also knew that if the sea of fire erupted at full force, it might be able to summon even more powerful beings. In fact, they also knew that with the 5th kiln, even if the sea of fire might not be able to do anything to the Almighties in Life Realm, the 5th kiln was practically invincible. With just one swing, they could destroy space. Even the Almighties in Death Realm might not be able to withstand that attack. This was bad. Once they learned of the 2 strongest uses of the 5th kiln, Old Yu and Ming were confident that as long as Dao Kong brought it out, it would belong to true Sacred Een World from then on. This was the greatest reason why they had come to Morning Dao's sect to cause trouble for Su Ming. They had not come for Dao Kong. Neither had they come to seek revenge, but to snatch the 5th kiln. Besides, since Su Ming had killed the forces of true Sacredine World in the barren lands of Divine Essence, even if they snatched the 5th kiln, as long as they could snatch it, Morning Dao sect would not be able to say anything. Almost at the instant the Book of Life and Death and the Abyss Activation Brush flew out, the Abyss Activation Brush looked as if it was seized by an invisible hand. When it tilted down, it immediately started drawing on the Book of Life and Death. In just an instant, the outline of the 5th kiln was drawn on the Book of Life and Death by the Abyss Activation Brush. It looked as if it was alive, and at the instant it was drawn, the black light on the Book of Life and Death shone and instantly swelled up. In the blink of an eye, at an unimaginable speed, it turned into a boundless black light that swiftly enveloped the 5th kiln. A huge suction force spread out from the outline of the fifth kiln drawn by the abyss activation brush on the swollen book of life and death. During that instant, the descending fifth kiln started moving towards the book of life and death with a loud bang. At the same time, as the book of life and death swelled up, it completely enveloped the fifth kiln like a seal. Once it enveloped it tightly, it started absorbing and fusing with it. Old Yu and Ming laughed loudly. A glint appeared in the eyes of the puppets by their sides. At the instant they rushed towards Su Ming, Old Yu and Ming formed seals with their hands as they laughed. They swung their arms at the same time, and a vortex instantly appeared around them. As it swept outwards, it turned into a relocation rune. They wanted to leave. Even if they had to ignore all the other people from true Sacredine world in the area, they still had to quickly bring the sealed fifth kiln out of Morning Dao sect. They had already completed half of their mission. At that moment, as the vortex swept outwards and the light from the rune reached a piercing degree, Su Ming did not even spare a glance at the origin puppets of Old Yu and Ming charging towards him. There was a still, gloomy look in his eyes, along with a madness that made it seem as if he wanted to kill all existences. A derisive smile appeared at the corners of his lips, but no one could tell whether he was laughing at himself or at others, or perhaps both. Another relocation rune. Su Ming's smile was incredibly twisted. At that moment, he had already sunk into an abnormal state. He watched the relocation rune activate and saw the fifth kiln surrounded by the book of life and death. Old Yu and Ming, who had excitement on their faces, were also about to disappear. You've underestimated the fifth kiln. Su Ming threw his head back and laughed. There was a forlorn tone in his laughter, along with his madness and indescribable resentment. At the instant his laughter echoed in the air, Su Ming spoke in a voice that sounded as if he was passing judgment. All the existences in the fifth kiln over the course of countless years, with my voice, the master of the fifth kiln, I will allow you to walk out of the fifth kiln. At the instant Su Ming's voice appeared, the fifth kiln surrounded by the book of life and death shuddered. There were countless living beings in the endless dimensions within it. Some of them were powerful, some were even more powerful, and some were incredibly powerful. They were all living beings Su Ming had seen before and had not seen before. At that instant, no matter what they were doing, all of them shuddered and threw their heads back to roar at the sky. Their bodies instantly disappeared, and when they reappeared, they were right outside the fifth kiln. It was as if some sort of seal had been broken, and they were released. Ferocious beasts, strange figures, fire spirits, people with wings, shocking dragons, and countless other strange-looking, murderous creatures appeared outside the fifth kiln at that instant. Presences that caused people's expressions to continuously change until they were filled with shock erupted from the countless living beings with loud bangs. Mastery Realm, Fate Realm, and Life Realm filled the 9 heavens. At that moment, 5 presences surged into the sky. When they appeared, they immediately shook the universe. They were 5 presences in Death Realm. The world roared. Su Ming released the existences in the fifth kiln. At the instant they appeared, they rammed against the book of life and death. No matter how strong that supreme treasure was, it was definitely not these people's opponent. As booming sounds surged into the sky, the book of life and death immediately shattered into pieces. The relocation was instantly interrupted. At the instant, fear and disbelief appeared on Old Yu and Ming's faces. They were instantly pounced on by countless figures. Shrill screams of pain reverberated in the air, and booming sounds surged into the sky. Su Ming did not even spare a glance at the puppets rushing towards him from both sides. When he turned his head around, he lifted his right hand and pointed at all the people from true Sacredine world in the area. Kill all the outsiders in this place. Countless ferocious creatures roared. Among them, there were quite a number of fire spirits. As they charged out, they immediately surrounded the puppets by Su Ming's sides and all the people from true Sacredine world in the area. Screams of pain reverberated in the air, and at that moment, it was as if the most beautiful song in the area was about to end, and people died. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 12:15. Greetings, my lord. Two men who were several hundreds of feet tall knelt behind Su Ming. These two men were big and built, and the most shocking thing about them was that each of them had 3 heads on their heads. Their expressions were ferocious, and when they knelt down, they held a head in their hands. There was no blood on those 2 heads, and they belonged to old Yu and Ming's origin puppets. Shrill screams of pain reverberated further behind them. The tens of thousands of living beings from the 5th kiln roared at the sky and closed in on Su Ming. All of them knelt down and let out a unified roar. Greetings, my lord. The tens of thousands of living beings all held bloody heads in their hands, and all of them belonged to cultivators from true Sacredine world. Further in the distance were the endless fiendish existences from the 5th kiln. They prostrated themselves on the ground and let out a unified roar. Greetings, my lord. At the same time, 2 shrill screams of pain shook the sky and earth. In the distance, 5 presences that were so powerful that they could make everyone's hearts tremble erupted with a bang. They were presences that belonged to those in Death Realm, and they were filled with the pinnacle power of stillness. As the presences erupted, 5 tall figures walked over slowly from the distance. One of them was an old fire spirit. He was dressed in an armor of flames, and his eyes were calm, but there was an ancient air about him. In his hands he held the broken book of life and death, as well as the abyss activation brush. The second person beside him was a thin skeleton. If it was not because of the will-o'-the-wisp shining in his eyes, there was a high possibility that people would think that he was a puppet formed from a corpse. His limbs were stiff, and when he came over, he did not walk. Instead, he floated forward. The third person was a man with 9 heads. There were 9 heads on his neck, one at the front, one at the left, and one at the right, causing him to be able to make all those who saw him suck in sharp breaths in shock. He held a head in his hand. That head's eyes were open, and there was disbelief in them. It was old Yu's head. The fourth person was an old woman. She held a walking stick, and under her silver hair were silver eyes. There was an ancient air about her, and there was a stillness about her. The last one was a black-robed young man. His expression was numb, and his eyes were dim. There were hundreds of wounds on his body, and none of them had been left behind before. It was unknown when they had been there, but they had yet to heal. His expression was aloof, and his eyes were icy cold. He was like a blade that could stab into any existence the master of the 5th kiln pointed at, even himself. He was also holding a head in his hand. It was Elder Ming. Almighties in Death Realm might be nearly indestructible, but if 5 people in Death Realm who were even stronger than them attacked at the same time, along with the suppression from the 5th kiln, then even those in Death Realm would die. The 2 old men's true levels of cultivation would be even higher. If it were not for the Book of Life and Death and the Abyss activation brush, they would not have truly reached Death Realm. Greetings, Master. The 5 living beings, exuding a terrifying presence, walked through the crowd until they surpassed their companions. When they arrived behind Su Ming, they knelt down together and let out buzzing sounds. At that moment, it was impossible for Su Ming not to be the center of attention as he stood there. It was impossible for him not to become a prodigious sun, and it was impossible for him not to become the most brilliant star in the universe. Behind him was a strange army of ferocious spirits whose end could not be seen. It would have been fine if it was just those in World Plane Realm kneeling down. Even those in Solar Culpa Realm kneeling down could be accepted. In fact, those in Mastery Realm kneeling down could be somewhat accepted. However, the worship from those in Fate Realm, the submission from those in Life Realm, and the bow from those in Death Realm instantly brought Su Ming's presence to an indescribable degree. All the people from true Sacredine world had died, All the people from the Emperor of Abyss True World had their bodies and souls destroyed, and all these things formed a bloody stench that surrounded the place. In an instant, Su Ming's name seemed to have turned a bloody shade of red. Zilong shuddered. The people from a fourth true world around him found it difficult to continue remaining aloof. All of them looked towards Su Ming, and in their eyes was zealous. There was also a wave of respect that had never existed before in their eyes. It was as if what Su Ming had done was an incredibly beautiful banquet to the cultivators from the fourth true world. In the midst of their infatuation, their zealousness towards Su Ming grew boundless. The 10 million cultivators from Morning Dao sect fell silent as they watched everything in shock. They could no longer think. In fact, the sect masters stared at the densely packed army of living beings filled with endless mighty pressure behind Su Ming with terrified gazes, along with the fifth kiln floating in the distant sky, surrounded by a sea of fire. In the end, all of their gazes simultaneously landed on the 5 almighties with terrifying presences behind Su Ming. The old man in blue had also dispelled the seal from the seawater trapping sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing. His face was slightly pale, but there was excitement on his face. This sort of excitement was something that was rarely seen at his age, but not only had it appeared at that moment, there was also great anticipation in his eyes. At the instant the seal on the seawater disappeared, shock appeared on sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing's faces. They might have been temporarily sealed, but they could still see everything that had happened outside. This scene surpassed their imaginations. They had not expected that the strongest aspect of the fifth kiln was not its sea of fire, nor was it its indestructible power, but the existence within it that could bring despair to most of its enemies. There are no outsiders left. Su Ming's voice was hoarse. When he spoke, he swept his gaze past the old man in blue before looking at sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing. Once he finished speaking, Su Ming took a step forward. The endless living beings from the fifth kiln behind him roared simultaneously. Once they stood up, they followed Su Ming forward. A monstrous presence erupted from the army, causing the pale faces of sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing to immediately change. Baldy, open the tunnel to the barrier. I want to meet the great Dao Chun. Su Ming's voice was hoarse, as if there were blood capillaries in it. When he said the last 5 words, his heart was in so much pain that it felt as if it had been torn apart. Dao Kong, sect master Yu of sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing had just spoken when a sigh came from the distant sky. Once it did so, a figure walked out of the air. Naturally, he was Dao Chen's disciple, Su Ming's elder. Sang. He did not look old, but there was a feeling of age in his eyes. There was also kindness and heartache hidden within them. He stared at Su Ming. He still had the gift Su Xian you want to give him. But all of this had completely changed due to what had happened previously. If you want to come, then come. I'll bring you there. Have them stay here, all right? Sang stared at Su Ming quietly. When he spoke, his voice carried the same kindness as when he was in Dark Mountain. A barely noticeable shudder ran through Su Ming's body. He lifted his head and stared at Sang quietly. He did not speak for a long, long time, but with a single move, he charged towards the spot where Sang was. When he closed in, Sang sighed softly. With a swing of his arm, he swept up Su Ming and disappeared from the place. Su Ming might have left the anointment ceremony in Morning Dao sect, but the living beings from the fifth kiln stood in the place with aloof expressions. A grim, murderous air spread out from their bodies. They stared at the area around them coldly, and an air of lawlessness was continuously spreading out from their bodies. The sky beyond the altar where progenitor Dao Chun isolated himself was warm and sunny. The area around him was lush green, and from the distance, white clouds could be seen. There were even red-crowned cranes dancing in the air. The fragrance of flowers filled the air, and the sounds of a small river flowing through the air sounded like the sounds of nature, causing the place to be incredibly beautiful. However, when Su Ming appeared in the place, the fourth grid that spread out from his body resonated with the 4 seasons of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. The black stillness of death instantly caused the sky to turn dark, and the lush green on the ground to immediately darken. The black stillness of death from Su Ming contained a great amount of resentment that could destroy the world. It caused the white clouds to turn black, the chirping of birds, and the fragrance of flowers to disappear. It also covered up the flow of the river, causing the place to look as if it had sunk into hell. Su Ming stood there. His presence changed the sky, and when Sang saw this, he fell silent. In Su Ming's eyes was the dullness of stillness, but within that dullness was a madness that could burn his blood in everything. He did not speak and walked towards the altar. With each step he took, the world would become darker. At the instant Su Ming stood on the altar, the world had already turned completely dark. Once Su Ming stepped on the altar, he lifted his right foot and stomped on it. With a bang, he disappeared. When he reappeared, he had returned to Su Xianyi's isolation grounds, and he saw the person who had his back turned towards him while meditating. Why? Su Ming stared at the person, and his heart was torn apart again. His body trembled, but there was no roar that shook the sky, no roar of anger. There was only a murmur that exuded an unfamiliar air. Your mother and I did not know each other before we became partners. Su Xianyi was silent. After a long while, he spoke softly. His words echoed in the chamber, and they were filled with nostalgia. But once we became partners, she became the only love in my life. When the fifth true world was destroyed, I personally watched all my people die. I watched your grandfather and grandmother's bodies die. I watched all my brothers and sisters laugh shrilly and brokenhearted. I watched all my people self-destruct without regard for anything else so that I could leave and protect the glory of the Abyss Builders. I watched these things until I brought her and you, who had yet to be born, to Divine Essence Star Ocean with the fifth kiln in agony. When I came to Divine Essence Star Ocean, a hint of madness appeared in my life. I wanted revenge. I wanted to destroy everything. I wanted to make the Abyss Builders rise to power once more. Finally, I found a way to break your curse, but just as this method was about to become reality, Dao Chun brought the cultivators of this expanse cosmos to this place. During that battle, your mother died, and during that battle, I possessed Dao Chun and became Dao Chun. You asked where I was when you needed me. I was here, and I watched over you quietly. I was here because after I possessed Dao Chun, I fought against the sublime paragon of this expanse cosmos. No one knew about this battle because it happened in this chamber. Su Xianyi's voice echoed in the chamber intensely. I'm asking for votes on Monday, and I'm going to explode tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 12:16. Su Ming was silent. Su Xianyi's voice echoed in his ears, refusing to leave even after a long time had passed. He had previously guessed that Su Xianyi's possession of true Morning Dao World would not go smoothly, but he did not expect that after Su Xianyi possessed true Morning Dao World, he would fight against the sublime paragon of true Morning Dao World in the chamber. It was also this battle that caused Su Xianyi to be unable to move his body all year round. He could only continuously heal his injuries in the chamber. I didn't lose that battle, and neither did the sublime paragon of true Morning Dao World. With the Abyss Builder's inborn ability and the irreversible art of fusing my real self with my clone, I destroyed the sublime paragon's physical body at the cost of my body becoming stiff and my injuries becoming incredibly severe. But as for his soul, I couldn't do anything about it. I could only watch as he fled. The only thing I could do was to have my other clone in the fifth kiln search for your mother and bring her corpse back to the fifth kiln to nourish her with life force. One day, once I recovered from my injuries, I would resurrect her. That clone of mine is in the fifth kiln, but he can't walk out, the figure with his back turned towards Su Ming said in anguish. His voice echoed in the chamber, causing Su Ming to be unable to say a single word once he heard it. He could only remain silent. When my clone found your mother in the past, She was in a broken dimension in Death region. She was in an ancient sword in true sacredine world, and you were also a dead baby. I didn't take you with me because at that time, your entire being had been corroded by the curse, and I noticed that in that strange Death region, you seemed to have a hint of life force that was gradually growing in you. When Su Xian he said those words, he sighed softly. Even if I don't say these things, you should be able to guess them. I'm your father. I won't harm you. Everything I did was not for me, Su Ming said in a low voice, lifting his head. Su Xian, my father, everything you did was not for me, and there was no need for you to do it for me. Su Ming shook his head. He was no longer the boy who had just walked out of Dark Mountain. He was the god of berserkers, the Su Ming who had risen to power in the barren lands of divine essence, and the Dao Kong who had intimidated Morning Dao sect. He had already grown up and become an adult. There were some things that might seem the same, but if anyone thought about them carefully, they would find that they were actually different. The first god of berserkers challenged true Morning Dao world in Death region. He might have lost, but he still exists. I've been guessing that the first god of berserkers was one of your chess pieces, the pawn you used to plunge into Death land. The use of this chess piece was to fight against the immortals and, at the same time, to understand Death region. The second god of berserkers is also your chess piece. In fact, I still think that the god of berserkers in the land of berserkers appeared because of your control from a distance. In the pictures I saw, the second god of berserkers brought me out of the world of 9 when I was still a baby, but in the end, the immortals invaded and took me away along with the second god of berserkers' daughter. I was brought to the land of immortals, and I became a spirit stone they could use to train until my physical body and soul were forcefully separated by the immortals. My physical body was sealed, and my soul was sent into Death region. You knew about all of this, or rather, it was part of your plan. The 30-something incarnations of Dark Mountain, the companions by my side time and time again. I was your chess piece. Tian was spying on me. He always wanted to find something on me. Before this, I never understood why the difference in Tian's level of cultivation was so great. In the past, and now, he always seemed to be getting stronger, but now I think I understand. Su Ming looked at Su Xianyi, and a hint of pain appeared in his eyes. He was the soul of true Morning Dao world sublime paragon who escaped after he lost his physical body. In the end, that soul chose the disciple of the immortals' sublime emperor, Tian. Su Ming smiled. That smile was filled with anguish, and there was a hint of unfamiliarity in it. Tian has always wanted to obtain something from me. He has also been plotting against my physical body. I think he is searching for the weakness of the Abyss Builders because he is just a divine soul. He is already injured and severely injured. If he wants to kill you, he must find a weakness of the Abyss Builders. That's why he reincarnated my soul and kept my real physical body. In fact, I think he even considered possessing me. My father, am I right? Su Ming looked at Su Xian and asked bitterly. Su Xian fell silent. He did all of this because the person he wanted to deal with in the end was you. I might not know what Tian's final plan was, but I can guess that you knew about it. Perhaps you didn't take me away when I was still a dead soul in the past, but the more important reason is that you noticed that the Sublime Paragon had fused with Tian. You noticed Tian paying attention to me, which is why you treated me as a chess piece. My purpose was to confuse Tian and make him walk down the wrong path so that he would not be a threat to you in the end. In fact, I also had another use. I had to trick the ancient existences in Death region so that I could leave Death region and head to the barren lands of divine essence based on your plan. You sent Dao Kong here so that I could possess him so that your plan could be completed. My guess is that you have been paying attention to me all this while. If I ran into any sort of life-threatening danger on the way, you would attack. In fact, you might have already attacked me. Every single time you attacked, you thought of yourself as my father, but you only needed me to not die and to continue walking down the path according to your plan. From the moment I was born, when I was still a baby, you arranged my life, and when I grew up, you arranged it again. In your eyes, besides a chess piece, is there anyone else in the world? Su Ming laughed brokenly. He stared at his father, who had his back turned towards him. His voice was not filled with anger, but calm. From the moment I learned that Bai Ling, a sect affiliated to Morning Dao sect, had appeared in Dark Mountain, I looked at the moon in the sky and drank wine. My heart was filled with complicated emotions because of her and you, because I knew that you had also participated in everything that happened in Dark Mountain. Did you not feel too moved when you saw your own child in pain? Su Ming sighed softly. You schemed against the Sublime Paragon, schemed against Death Region, and even schemed against the 180 expanse cosmoses of Saint Defire behind the Immortals Union. All of these were your schemes. Xiao Hong was brought into my world by you, and you were also the one who brought Old Man Extermination's fragment, the seed of life extermination. You asked me to fuse with that fragment so that I could become the current Old Man Extermination. You asked me to go to Divine Essence Star Ocean, and under your control, you asked me to destroy the fifth ocean in Divine Essence Star Ocean. Dark Dawn's 180 expanse cosmoses is clearly a relocation spot. I don't know why you did this, but I can imagine that you wanted Saint Defire and Dark Dawn to wage an unprecedented war in arid Triad expanse cosmos, or beyond it. You're taking revenge. You want to make the Abyss Builders rise to power. Can you say that you are doing this for me? Su Ming smiled. There was deep anguish in his smile, as if he was mocking Su Xianyi. He was not mocking Su Xianyi, but himself. After a long while, Su Xianyi said softly, walking from death to life is the only path you can take to break the curse in the final expanse cosmos. Did you give me this path? Su Ming stared at Su Xianyi's back, and his words gradually turned cold. You're still young. You don't understand. After some time, Su Xianyi sighed softly. There was anguish in his voice as well. When you understand that there is no such thing as a family without a clan, you will understand me. You will truly understand me. Su Ming was silent for a moment before he threw a question back at him. Without a home, how can there be a race? Su Xianyi shuddered and mumbled. If you insist on hating me, then you can. Everything I did was indeed not for you. I did it for all Abyss Builders. What do I hate you for? Su Ming shook his head. I hate you for not being by my side when I needed you and when I saw other people with parents. My resentment is indeed great, but I am no longer the child I was in the past. It was just a momentary change in my emotions. But in truth, what do I hate you for? Do I hate you for manipulating my life? My life has always been given to me by you. So why should I hate you? Do I hate you for not being by my side? I'm already used to being alone, used to being lost. What else can I hate? Do I hate you for sacrificing your wife to make the Abyss Builders rise to power? When Su Ming said those words, tears fell from his eyes. They streaked down his cheeks, reflecting his grief. At the instant he said those words, Su Xianyi shuddered. I'm not young anymore. I've always been alone, and since a long time ago, I learned how to analyze things based on clues, but I didn't want to think about it deeply. I didn't want to. Do you know why I took the fifth kiln away? Why I didn't leave it to you? It wasn't because you wanted it to belong to me, but because you didn't want to face it. You didn't want to see the fifth kiln. Even if my mother died, she still wanted to hold the baby in her arms. This might seem like nothing out of the ordinary, but she held me and floated alone in the galaxy. She wanted to protect me. This sort of subconscious protection. Who was she guarding against? Heavy breathing came from Su Xianyi. His body trembled even more furiously. Clearly, his heart was not calm at that moment. There was also an endless amount of space around him shattering. She was guarding against you. Even if she died, she wanted to take me away from your side. My father, did you really think that I didn't know anything? That was an accident. For the first time, Su Xianyi roared at Su Ming. As it echoed in the air, Su Ming tumbled backwards and coughed up a mouthful of blood. An accident. Let's just treat it as an accident. What can I hate you for? She's your wife, and you placed her in the fifth kiln to resurrect her. That's why I don't hate you. I only have resentment. Because she's your wife and because you're my father. What can I use to hate you? I could only take the fifth kiln away and not let you get close to it. Su Ming said flatly, while wiping off the blood at the corners of his mouth. The first chapter is here. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 12:17. But it's one thing for you to treat me and my mother as chess pieces. We are your family, and you have a right to do so. If I hate you, then I can only hate you for being an unfilial son. But why did you treat my friends and all the people I know as chess pieces? When Su Ming lifted his head, red appeared in his eyes. They have nothing to do with you. Yu Xian isn't suitable for me? It's not that she isn't suitable for me, but she has a mission you gave her. She wants to stay in the Emperor of Abyss true world because you treated her as a chess piece from the moment she was born. Yu Xian, Fei Er, they are the same person. Su Ming clenched his fists, and more red appeared in his eyes. He could vaguely feel the tear that had fallen on his face while he was outside. The little sister who stayed by my side when everything was dark, the daughter of the second god of berserkers. I should have thought of it a long time ago. But when you stopped me from extending my hand at that moment, I understood. Su Ming shook his head. He had come here to ask why, but he also understood that this was a question that he already knew the answer to. I've already done a lot for you. Let me go. Let my mother go. Let my friends go. From now on, you can walk down the path of the Abyss Builders to rise to power. You can continue saying that there is no home without a race. That is indeed the case. There is no home without a race. Once you have a race, you can build your own family, but your family is no longer me or my mother. And what I stand for is that there is no home without a race. It is precisely because I have a home that I will protect a race for my family. For my family's safety, I will make a race rise to power. The ones who support me in doing all of this are my family. Blood trickled out of the corners of Su Ming's mouth. Su Xianyi's roar just now had injured his body. As he spoke, Su Ming wiped off the blood at the corners of his mouth and took a few steps back while looking at his father. To all Abyss Builders, you are a senior worthy of respect. You are the soul of our race worthy of respect. As he spoke, Su Ming wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed deeply. But as a father, as a husband, you... Su Ming lifted his head, and an unfamiliar light appeared in his eyes. He did not continue speaking, but instead turned around and took a step into the air. Stop using me. Stop plotting against my mother and my friends. This is the last time. This time, I just won't call you father, but if there's a next time, we'll be enemies. From now on, you'll be the hero who will make the Abyss Builders rise to power, and I will just be a nobody who will protect my family and my companions. Let's not have any more interactions. Su Ming stepped into the air and gradually disappeared. When he appeared, he stood on the altar. Before him was Sang, and with a complicated gaze, he stared at Su Ming. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he sighed softly. When he lifted his right hand, a wooden sword appeared in it. Your father asked me to give this to you. He once said that if you can control this sword, you can bring glory to your clan. If you can't control it, you can live a peaceful life. Su Ming did not look at the wooden sword. Instead, he looked at the cultivator called Sang. As he stared at him, the red in his eyes gradually turned into longing. After a long while, Su Ming moved forward gently and hugged Sang. Elder, La Su misses you, Sang shuddered and patted Su Ming's back gently. He looked young, but at that moment, the benevolence and sentimental air of an old man gradually appeared on his face. This sword, Sang hesitated for a moment. Then a resolute look suddenly appeared in his eyes. When he lifted his right hand, the sword disappeared from his hand. You won't want this sword. My young La Su has grown up. You can venture into the universe on your own. Go, walk down the path that belongs to you based on your own thoughts and thoughts. Sang stared at Su Ming with a kind expression. There was also longing in his eyes. He had watched the child grow up and raised him with his own hands. His feelings for Su Ming were the deepest memories he had ever had in his life. He had already treated Su Ming as his own child. Su Ming stared at Sang. After a long time had passed, he took a few steps back and kowtowed a few times towards Sang. He was worshipping his elder, the elder who had brought him up, taught him everything, and given him warmth when he was young. Su Ming left. When he was far away from the world, Sang stared at Su Ming's departing figure, then slowly turned around and stepped into the altar, appearing in the isolation grounds where Su Xian resided. As he stared at Su Xian, Sang remained silent for a moment before he placed the wooden sword by the side. There is a part of your will in this sword. I might not be an abyss builder, but I can tell that besides protecting him, this will can also change his personality and the path of his fate. He has already grown up. Master, please spare him. Sang sighed softly and bowed quietly to Su Xianyi's back. Home and race. Su Xian, he said softly after a long while, as if he did not hear Sang's voice behind him. He stared at the rattle drum and the hairpin in front of him. As he stared at them, a woman's face seemed to appear before his eyes. Time trickled by slowly. When Su Xian let out a sigh, he actually slowly turned around and actually gradually stood up from his cross-legged position. It was a middle-aged man with a dignified expression. His tall and sturdy body seemed to be able to support heaven and earth. When he stood up, Sang was not surprised at all. He maintained his previous posture, bowing his head and not getting up. When Su Ming walked out of the world where Su Xian isolated himself and returned to the place where the anointment ceremony was held, the people from the fourth true world had already left. Only the cultivators from Morning Dao sect remained in the place, along with all the living beings from the fifth kiln. When they saw Su Ming, they immediately bowed together. At the same time, the 10 million cultivators from Morning Dao sect also cast sideways glances at Su Ming. There were different thoughts on their faces, especially the sect masters in Ri, Yu, and Xing. They watched Su Ming walk out of the air and walk to the group of living beings from the fifth kiln. They watched him swing his arm, and the living beings exuding a grim presence turned into long arcs that disappeared into the fifth kiln. Then, they watched the fifth kiln gradually shrink before it fused into the center of Su Ming's brows. The area was silent. Su Ming stared at the vermilion bird's continent. In silence, a hint of determination appeared in his eyes. Dao Kong, Dao Hua, Dao Lin, the three of you are dynasts of Morning Dao sect. You have noble statuses, and you have the right to open a palace for free meals. But as dynasts, if you want to become the ruler of true Morning Dao world, you will need war achievements. The silence was broken by Sect Master Xing's low voice. His voice spread through the area. He ignored everything that happened in the area and slowly stated the final step of the anointment ceremony. Let's fight. The three of you are Morning Dao sect's bright dynasts, but in truth, there are 3 hidden dynasts behind you. The hidden dynasts also have the right to inherit Morning Dao sect. Let's fight. You will need war achievements. The first person who can kill 10 million people from the Immortals Union will become the future master of true Morning Dao world. Reopen the war achievement ranking. You might be dynasts, but if you die in battle, then the person at the top of the ranking will inherit your right to be a dynast and become a quasi-dynast. If all of you die in battle, then the 3 quasi-dynasts born will be conferred the title of true dynasts. Let's fight. Morning Dao sect will wage an all-out war against the Immortals Union. A glint appeared in Sect Master Xing's eyes. When his voice echoed in the air, it traveled into the ears of all the cultivators, and it turned into a wave of excitement. Over the years, Morning Dao sect might have waged war against the Immortals Union, but it had always been controlled to a certain extent. They had never used their full strength, but on that day, it was clear that the Council of Sect Masters had decided a long time ago that when the dynasts appeared, they would wage an all-out war against the Immortals Union. At that moment, as Sect Master Xing's voice echoed in the air, all the Morning Dao sect disciples in the area immediately threw their heads back and roared. Let's fight. Let's fight. Let's fight. This time, we will no longer be fighting slowly against the Immortals Union like we did in the past. This time, we will wage an all-out war. We will completely destroy the Immortals Union in one go. There was an even greater excitement in Sect Master Xing's voice. When it echoed in the air, Sect Master, you swept his gaze past the crowd. This time, Morning Dao Sect will turn into 10 armies of cultivators. There will be a total of 30 million disciples, and we will slaughter our way into the Immortals' Union from different directions. Dao Kong, Dao Hua, and Dao Lin, the 3 of you will serve as supervisors. You will each be in one army and will not participate in the overall arrangements. Your missions will be listed separately, and they will be different from each other. As he spoke, Sect Master Yu lifted his right hand, and 3 jade slips immediately charged towards Su Ming and the other 2. Su Ming's expression was aloof. There was a dull, still look in his eyes. At the instant the jade slip closed in on him, he did not lift his hand to catch it. He only cast a glance at it, and it immediately shattered with a bang before him. Yet even though it had shattered, Su Ming had seen everything within it with just one glance. Once Su Ming returned from Su Xianyi's isolation grounds, he had intended to leave Morning Dao Sect, but when he heard the words of war and saw the mission given to him in the jade slip, a barely noticeable glint shone in his eyes, and he temporarily gave up on the thought of leaving. His original plan was to search for his 3 senior brothers, go to Yin Death region, and then go to the Immortals' Union to seize his real physical body. His current level of cultivation was still not enough for him to do all of this, and if he wanted to go to the Emperor of Abyss True World to search for Yuxian, he would need an even greater level of cultivation. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. In silence, he turned around and charged into the distance. The bald crane and the abyss dragon immediately followed behind him. Zhu Yukai walked over quietly, and Flame Fiend's progenitor also charged forward at full speed. He turned into a long arc and disappeared with Su Ming. Besides these people, Su Ming did not bring anyone else with him. Without a single word, he charged to the place where the information in the jade slip told him to go. Behind him, Dao Lin and Dao Hua also grabbed their own jade slips. When they scanned them with their divine senses, they frowned. Their expressions were slightly sour, but they could not refuse. Once they bowed to Sect Masters Ri, Yu, and Xing, they turned around and turned in a long arcs to gather their trusted aides, followers, and quite a large number of their tribe members to swiftly charge towards 2 different directions. Second chapter, to be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 12:18. Di Tian still has secrets. In the northwest of true Morning Dao world was a dazzling galaxy. There was a crimson planet there. It might have been crimson and looked as if it contained flames, but in truth, it was cold and filled with a chilling air that no one could get close to. Su Ming sat in space beyond the planet and stared at it coldly. A faint glint appeared in his eyes as he mumbled under his breath. As a sublime paragon soul, he occupied Di Tian's physical body. There's no need for him to form the Immortals' Union and fight against Morning Dao Sect. His relationship with Su Xian, it doesn't seem to be as I imagined it to be. A dark light shone in Su Ming's eyes, and he sank into deep thought. Oh well, as long as he doesn't scheme against me, this has nothing to do with me. Right now, what I need to do is to seize back my real physical body and search for my senior brothers. Then, I'll head to the Emperor of Abyss True World. An aloofness of extinction appeared on Su Ming's face. He remembered the mission Sect Masters Ri, Yu, and Xing had given him in the Jade Slip. Kill Bai Ling, Sacred Lady of Phoenix Sect. Besides telling Su Ming to stay here and wait for the gathering, there was only one sentence in the Jade Slip. Su Ming remained silent for a moment before he slowly closed his eyes. His presence completely disappeared, as if he had died. By his side, Flame Fiend's progenitor looked around him. Zhu Yukai quietly sat down with his eyes closed. The Abyss Dragon and the Bald Crane were mumbling to each other. No one knew what they were discussing, but judging by the sparkle in their eyes, it was clear that they were incredibly excited. Days passed. About half a month after Su Ming left Morning Dao Sect and came to this place, a piercing light suddenly erupted from the crimson planet in front of him. At the instant the light appeared, Su Ming opened his eyes. When he looked over, he saw the planet let out a bang and explode out of nowhere in the air. As the violent impact swept through the area, it turned into a violent gust of wind that howled. Right before Su Ming's eyes, he saw the instant the planet crumbled and booming sounds reverberated in the air. Not a single hint of the power of its destruction spread outwards. Instead, it turned into a gigantic black hole. Booming sounds continued without end. At the instant the vortex appeared, groups of cultivators in armor slowly walked out of the black hole with aloof gazes. Each cultivator exuded a murderous aura, and a brilliant light shone in their eyes. They were not ordinary cultivators. Su Ming could sense a large amount of blood on them. Almost all of them were cold-blooded battle cultivators who had killed an unknown number of living beings. This was the power formed by the collapse of a planet to activate a relocation rune that covered an unknown area, and it had spread to an unknown amount of area. Had mourning Dao sex cultivators. In the blink of an eye, more than 1 million cultivators walked out of the black hole. They were packed densely together, and the grim, murderous air spreading out from them seemed to be able to freeze the galaxy. Once they walked out, they formed a square formation with 10,000 people. They stood tall in the galaxy and appeared before Su Ming. More than 1 million cultivators walked out of the black hole in the blink of an eye. They were packed densely together, and the grim, murderous air spreading out from them seemed to be able to freeze the galaxy. Once they walked out, they formed a square formation with 10,000 people. They stood tall in the galaxy and appeared in front of Su Ming. Gradually, more cultivators walked out, and warships exuding mighty pressure also appeared. This process lasted for about half a day before it gradually came to an end. Above them were hundreds of thousands of warships. They floated slowly, and behind them were nearly 10,000 huge stone platforms that were 100,000 feet tall. Further in the distance were thousands of gigantic beasts that were even larger. They were roaring at the sky. Each of these beasts had a chain on their bodies, and the thousands of chains were tied to a planet behind them. It was a planet that had appeared from a black hole. It shone with a 7-colored light, and waves of terrifying mighty pressure and presence spread out from it. Dynast Dao Kong. A soft voice with a lackadaisical tone spread out from the 7-colored planet, and the 5 million cultivators in the area immediately let out a low roar. That roar shook the sky and earth, causing the galaxy to tremble. A large number of cracks appeared in space, forming an indescribable mighty pressure that seemed to want to suppress Su Ming. War Chamber. The 5 million cultivators of the Earthen Pole and the Earthen Pole welcomed Dynast Dao Kong to command our battle. When the soft and velvety voice rang out again, the 5 million cultivators in the surroundings roared in unison once more. This time, the roars were even more intense. In fact, the moment the roars rang out, all 5 million cultivators released their cultivation bases. At the same time, a monstrous, murderous aura erupted from their bodies. That murderous aura was so thick that it almost gained corporeal form. It turned into countless vengeful spirits that could only be detected by divine sense. Once they appeared in the galaxy, they roared at Su Ming. If it was any other cultivator, even if their level of cultivation was higher than Su Ming's, when they faced the murderous aura formed by the 5 million cultivators from the war chamber, their hearts would tremble, and they would be so intimidated that they would be forced back. In fact, their minds would be injured. Behind Su Ming, the expression of Flame Fiend's progenitor changed, and he instantly turned pale. The Abyss Dragon shuddered, shocked to the core. As for Zhu Kai, his pupils shrank, but his expression remained the same. The bald crane yawned and put on a scornful look as it mumbled under its breath. As for Su Ming, his expression did not change in the slightest. In fact, even his pupils did not shrink like Zhu Kai's. He could tell with just one glance that the war chamber was intentionally intimidating them. It was clearly a warning to Su Ming that even if he was a dynast and had come to command the battle, he should not be too presumptuous. While they were warning Su Ming, they also bared their fangs to let him understand that they were not to be trifled with. In fact, Su Ming could even see that it did not matter whether it was the army of cultivators in front of him, the warships in midair, or the more powerful cultivators on the floating stone platforms. Most of them had an aloof, derisive look in their eyes when they looked at Su Ming when they exuded their cultivation bases and the murderous aura. They clearly looked down on Su Ming. They only acknowledged strength. Even if most of them had heard about the anointment ceremony in Morning Dao sect, there were certain things that they would not believe unless they saw it with their own eyes. This was something that was even more true for those who were stronger. There were plenty of people among the 5 million cultivators who believed that the anointment ceremony was fake. I'm sorry, but I hope that you will not make any suggestions, Your Highness. My group of cultivators only acknowledge the strong. If they're disrespectful to you in any way, please do not hate them for the sake of them killing countless members of the Immortals Union over the past 1,000-something years. In truth, I really don't want to tell you this. If you hate them, it's useless. The lackadaisical and velvety voice echoed in the air, as usual, causing most of the 5 million cultivators in the area to roar with laughter. All right, let's welcome our Dynast Dao Kong, the war supervisor of our earthen pole. When that voice rang out, laughter filled the air. A powerful, grim, murderous air reverberated in the air, and the cultivators in front of Su Ming instantly moved. The camp of 10,000 people moved simultaneously, and booming sounds shook the sky. They formed a battle formation in front of Su Ming, and a path leading to the planet in the distance was revealed in the crowd. However, the invisible murderous aura from all the cultivators in the area gathered on both sides of the path. Su Ming cast the cultivators a cold glance and took a step forward. At the instant his first step landed, the power of those in Mastery Realm erupted from his body with a bang, causing the galaxy to tremble. The mighty pressure formed by the 5 million cultivators in front of him immediately shuddered. As Su Ming approached the planet, the power of his cultivation base became stronger, and with just one person, he fought against the mighty pressure gathered by 5 million cultivators. With each step Su Ming took, booming sounds rang out, and they were the sounds formed by the 5 million cultivators retreating together. At that moment, a brilliant light shone in the eyes of the cultivators on the warships above, on the stone platforms, and on the backs of the huge beasts. They stared at Su Ming with shocked gazes. Dynast Dao Kong, you're so mighty. Erlangs of the War Chamber, let Dynast Dao Kong see your slaughter. When the soft voice came from the planet again, the 5 million cultivators immediately roared in unison. At the same time, they released all of their murderous auras without holding anything back. This was a murderous aura that was several times stronger than before. This murderous aura could cause laws to roll back, the heavens to close their eyes, and the entire area to instantly descend into midwinter. The strength of the murderous aura immediately caused the expression of Flame Fiend's progenitor to change again. In fact, a solemn expression appeared on Zhu Yukai's face. He had heard of Morning Dao Sect's war chamber before. It was a sturdy blade formed by a group of lunatics. They were the strongest force in Morning Dao Sect against the outside world. They were stationed at the borders all year round. When there were enemies, they trained by fighting, and when there were no enemies, they trained by fighting on their own. They were Morning Dao Sect's war chamber, whose name shook the 4 great true worlds. The war chamber was divided into the celestial polarity and the earthly polarity. There were 5 million cultivators in each of them, and the ones leading them were the 2 powerful and terrifying cultivators whose names were known to the 4 great true worlds as Poison Fong and Wild Dog. Poison Fong led the Heaven Pole, and just like how he was called by others, he was incredibly ruthless. Wild Dog led the Earth Pole, and he was incredibly despicable. Wherever he went, not a single blade of grass would grow, and he would kill a heinous number of people. Su Ming stared coldly at the monstrous, murderous aura spreading out from the 5 million cultivators. A dark light shone in his eyes, and during that instant, an astonishing, murderous aura erupted from Su Ming's body. It was a murderous aura that would increase slightly with each life he killed. It was a monstrous, murderous aura that caused the universe to rumble and the expressions of the 5 million cultivators to change drastically. Compared to the number of lives he had killed, the number of lives that had died in Su Ming's hands was innumerable. If it was not for the destruction of the forces of power from true Sacredine world, keeping a lookout over the barren lands of Divine Essence Star Ocean, and the destruction of tens of thousands of cultivators from the Immortals Union, just the destruction of the waves of Tears Swarm in Divine Essence Star Ocean would have been enough to form the shocking murderous aura on Su Ming's body. This is the first explosion of power this week. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1219. His murderous aura might not be able to compare to the murderous aura that the 5 million cultivators from the war chamber had gathered together, but the instant it spread out, it still suppressed the aura of the 5 million people in the war chamber's earthen pole. Su Ming's powerful cultivation base and monstrous murderous aura caused his eyes to be still. He gave off a feeling that he did not have any intelligence. There was only darkness and malice spreading out from his body. He slowly walked forward towards the path the 5 million people had revealed and towards the planet in the distance. Wherever he went, the hearts of the cultivators from the war chamber in the area would tremble. They moved back together, and when they stared at Su Ming, there was shock in their eyes. They were all cultivators who had gone through hundreds of battles, and their hands were stained with a large amount of blood. They killed mercilessly, but the more they did so, the clearer they could sense the murderous aura and killing intent from Su Ming's body. The density of his murderous aura far surpassed that of any of them. In fact, they felt as if the person walking towards them at that moment was not a cultivator, but a primordial beast from ancient times. That beast seemed to have walked out of a sea of blood, and with each step he took, he seemed to have struck the hearts of the 5 million people, causing their hearts to beat along with his footsteps. They immediately felt a rarely seen, oppressive feeling. But that was not all. Besides the murderous aura and his cultivation base spreading out from Su Ming's body, there was also an indescribable malice within him. It was as if it was the source of all gloom in the world, and it could distort a person's personality. It would make a person who yearned for the light to release the desires in his heart and turn him into a lawless person. To the cultivators who prided themselves on being righteous, this was the greatest source of malice in the universe. It was a source that they could not accept and wanted to destroy, but to the 5 million cultivators from the war chamber's earthen pole, it was a presence that gradually made them burn with fervor and respect. It caused them to tremble, and at the same time, a desire to get closer to him grew within them. In the war chamber's earthen pole, which focused on killing, each of them respected the powerful warriors, those who killed even more madly, which was why at the instant they sensed Su Ming's murderous aura and his cultivation base, they instinctively moved back, and the shock in their eyes gradually turned into respect. Just like that, Su Ming did not say a single word. He only walked forward slowly and walked through the path the 5 million cultivators had revealed. Before him, the cultivators were retreating, and behind him, the cultivators lowered their heads to worship him. This was a form of respect towards the powerful warriors, towards those who killed even more, and towards those who exuded an incredibly evil presence. Perhaps no one could understand this sort of respect, but in the war chamber, this was the number one acknowledgement. When Su Ming walked through the long path formed by the 5 million people, all the cultivators behind him bowed to him. Su Ming moved past the warships in the sky, the numerous platforms, the countless huge beasts, and in the end, he stepped on the planet. On the planet filled with 7-colored light, he saw towering platforms. The platform was in the shape of a pentagon and was extremely huge. In fact, There were countless platforms like this on the planet. They surrounded the largest platform in the center and filled the entire planet. On the largest platform, there were 4 people there. 1 in front, 2 behind, number 1 middle school. Ahead of them was a fully armored cultivator. His face couldn't be seen, only his white hair fluttering in the wind. He silently stood there, and a shocking killing intent spread out from his body. Countless vengeful souls existed within this killing intent, shocking the heavens and earth. However, this murderous aura still could not compare to Su Ming's. The 2 people behind him wore similar armor and held great swords in their hands. The tips of their swords were stabbed into the ground. They stood there silently, but when they raised their heads, their eyes were cold and merciless. They were indifferent to the living, and they were arrogant enough to single-handedly destroy an entire planet. The person surrounded by the 3 people was a middle-aged man who sat cross-legged on the ground. There was an ancient table before him, and there was a pot of wine on it. He was drinking by himself. The man's face was as white as jade, and he was incredibly handsome. However, there was a long scar on his face, and it was red and ferocious. It caused the man's handsomeness to disappear, and in its place was a strange and enchanting ferociousness. His eyebrows were very long, but if anyone took a closer look, they would find that they were drawn. His face was pale, but if anyone took a closer look, they would find that his pale skin was also drawn. His eyes were long and narrow, like the eyes of a phoenix. He drank a mouthful of wine and looked at Su Ming, who was walking towards him from the air. The rumors in Morning Dao sect are finally true for once. I didn't expect that such a fiend would appear. The man smiled. His voice was as soft as ever. He lifted his right hand and swung at the table. Immediately, a second wine cup appeared on the table across from him. Since you possess such a murderous aura, you've obtained the War Chamber's acknowledgement. I'll treat you to a drink. The man chuckled softly. He sat there and pointed forward. Su Ming stared at the man who smelled like makeup before him coldly, and his pupils suddenly shrank. There was not a hint of murderous aura about the man, but when Su Ming looked at him, he felt as if he was looking at a wild dog that stood on an endless amount of corpses and vengeful spirits, devouring their flesh and blood and tearing apart their souls. Wild dogs were a type of weak beast that existed on many planets. They were so weak that even some relatively strong mortals could kill them. However, wild dogs were also mortal beasts that possessed great aggression and were filled with brutality. In Dao Kong's memories, no one knew the name of the commander of the War Chamber's Earthen Pole. He only had one title, Wild Dog. Su Ming did not speak. He walked to the table, swung his arm, and sat down cross-legged. Immediately, the head of a crane filled with nastiness appeared behind him. Its nose twitched a few times, and its eyes instantly lit up. It quickly walked out, grabbed the pot of wine with its claws, and started drinking in big mouthfuls. Murderous wine gathered by vengeful spirits. Darn it all, this is good stuff. It can nourish my soul. When the bald crane finished drinking from the pot, it immediately moved and turned into an old man with the air of an immortal beside Su Ming. He let out a fake cough, but just as he was about to say something, he suddenly felt that his current appearance did not quite match with the ghastly air around him. Even the 7 colors spreading out from his body gave off an even more bizarre feeling. The ghastly air around him, the murderous aura and vengeful spirits that came from beyond the planet caused a thought to appear in the bald crane's head. It moved again, and this time, it turned into a ferocious bald man. The middle-aged man, the commander of the War Chamber's Earthen Pole, stared at the bald crane with great interest. A smile appeared on his face, but it moved the scars on his face, causing his smile to look incredibly ghastly. He clapped his hands, and instantly, numerous illusory figures appeared in the air off to the side. As they neared, they placed 7 or 8 jugs of alcohol on the table. The bald crane's eyes lit up. It licked its lips, then picked up one of the pots and started gulping it down in big mouthfuls. Su Ming's expression remained the same. Not a single change could be detected on his face. The The middle-aged man cast a glance at the bald crane, then looked at Su Ming. "My name is Wild Dog," the man said with a smile as he picked up his wine cup. "I don't know what your mission is, but the order I received is to enter the Immortals' Union from the Third War Zone with the power of the War Chamber's earthen pole. On the way, we will run into more than 30 races from the Immortals' Union. We might even run into some strange existences, but no matter what we run into, my War Chamber will bring you to the end of the Third War Zone, the core of the Immortals' Union. This is the order I have been given. No matter what mission you have, I wish you luck in completing it." When the man spoke, he drank the wine in his cup in one gulp. Then he lifted his right hand and swung it. Immediately, an illusory picture appeared in the air beside him. It was a map, and it contained all of true Morning Dao World. "This is the core of the Immortals' Union." As he spoke, the man pointed forward with his right hand, and a spot immediately appeared on the map. Su Ming stared at it without speaking. This is also the territory of the Immortals in the past. It can be said that this is where their main camp is located. Right now, besides the Immortals, Phoenix Sect has also moved here. Su Ming's expression remained the same. He stared at the spot, and the third eye suddenly appeared at the center of his brows. In an instant, the map was magnified endlessly in Su Ming's eyes, and he saw Death region located in the region the Immortals had occupied in the past. There is also a dark region in the deepest part of it. Su Ming was familiar with that place. It was the place where his real physical body was suppressed. When a man saw the third eye at the center of Su Ming's brows, his pupils shrank slightly. He lifted his right hand and swung his arm, and the map immediately disappeared. Just at that moment, a ray of golden light suddenly appeared in the sky above the planet. It seemed to have pierced through the endless starry sky and arrived. With a loud bang, the sky above the planet, as well as the sky outside, was instantly dyed gold. "The Golden Dawn command has arrived. Battle Hall of the Earth's Pole, full speed ahead." His words were gentle, but they traveled beyond the planet and into the ears of all the cultivators. Immediately, the 5 million cultivators threw their heads back and roared at the sky. The warships charged forward, the gigantic beasts roared, and a piercing light erupted from the platforms. The long arcs formed by the 5 million cultivators created a screen that blotted out the sky as they charged forward at full speed. The seven-colored star let out a thunderous rumble as it was pulled forward by the beasts. The movement of a star was as fast as a meteor, which showed how fast the cultivators in the outside world were. The man smiled faintly and picked up the pot of wine to pour himself another drink. A pensive look appeared in Su Ming's eyes. After a moment, he stood up. "If that's the case, I will leave when we arrive. Thank you for your help." Su Ming nodded at the man. With one move, he charged into the distance and instantly disappeared from the place. When he reappeared, he was on a mountain on the other side of the planet. As for the bald crane, it could not bear to leave. It swept up all the pots of wine and quickly chased after Su Ming. The man smiled faintly and watched Su Ming leave into the distance. "He knows that I don't welcome him. He sure is a tactful dynast." The man swung his right hand, and another pot of wine appeared on the table. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.